Over the last couple weeks, I set out on the mission to interview some of Crusader King 3's biggest mod creators in hopes that they could offer you insight not only into the futures of their mods, but also what it takes to make a mod, what it takes to lead a mod, and the interfacing with Paradox that's involved, and basically just everything involved with modding, at least as far as they could squeeze into a 30 to 40 minute conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's mostly going to be like a podcast format, as you can kind of see here. My voice isn't really doing a whole lot, but I hope that you enjoy this more low-key thing. You can turn it on and just sort of do other things. That was kind of my intention with it. But as always, I'm Soul. Thank you so much for watching. I'm not going to do a proper outro for this video, so I will happily see you on the other side. What's up, everybody? It's Soul, and today I am here with Wrench, the lead. Actually, what would you want me to call you? The lead developer, the lead modder
One
on.
of the leads.
Yeah, one of the
lead
leads.
developers.
One of the leads on the Fallen Eagle. How are you this morning?
I'm great. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm well. Obviously, you're the first one up, so this one might be the roughest of the bunch, but we'll see how we do. Hopefully, I
Yeah.
warm up as this little series progresses. I have 3 other people that I'm also talking to today, so hopefully everybody notices. But
Nice. Okay.
yeah, it's I wanted to get you guys all in here, so we could get different questions. But I have a question for
An
you
excuse
first.
to be tough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So first question that I have for you, because I'm curious, why Wrench? This is very much not related to the Fallen Eagle, but do you have, do you want to share why your username is Wrench?
Okay. So this is very, very old. Like I did this account ages ago. So the main reason I actually don't remember, but I think it's probably related to a video game character or something.
Oh, okay. A video maker.
I'm not sure. It's really old, really, really old.
No, that's funny. I've always looked at it and been like, why is it Wrench? That's such an interesting username. And then it's like,
Same. I sometimes I just,
oh,
I just ran with it.
yeah. And then you also have like, is that logo the middle of a wrench? Like, what is your picture?
Yeah, it's
Oh,
it's the first picture of a wrench I found on Google.
oh my god, that's so wonderful. I love that. So jumping over to the Fallen Eagle, were you on the team or like the original team? I don't know how long the mod has been in development, but were you part of the team that started development?
The mod was posted on Steam on the first day, so like it was an announcement that we were working on it. But I joined the mod 3 months after that, or 4 months after that.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I didn't witness, I think, only the first 5-10% of the development, and then
Oh,
afterwards I was fully part of it.
okay. So do you because you said you're one of the leads. Are there who is the main leader? Is there not do you not have one?
So I'd say 2022, 2023, I was the main leader
Mhm.
because there was like a 2-year period where not a lot of people worked on the mod. It was just me, maybe another coder, an artist, and like 2, 3 historians. It was a very small team.
Okay.
But then now I'd say we have 2, 3 other lead developers. We have Ancient, we have Cybersun, we have Marshall. So yeah, the team grew very much this year.
Wow.
So I could take like I didn't step down, but I pulled back a bit from leading the mod.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's
Yeah,
probably a huge task. I mean, the Fallen Eagle is an enormous
yeah. It's
mod with a lot of scope.
been 4 years.
Oh,
I felt I felt it had to be,
has
I
it been
just pulled
4?
back at them. Yeah, CK3, I think was released September 2020 during the Corona.
Oh my god, you're right. Yeah. Oh my god. So you've been on the team. Wait, so when did the Fallen Eagle come out? Was it like shortly after launch?
No, we were developing it until April 2021.
Okay.
Then that was the first release. And then I think we took a while to release an update. I think we released the update in ModCon, the first ModCon, if you remember it.
Yeah, I do.
That was our first update after release. Then after
Oh,
that, we just kept releasing, usually with CK3's updates.
interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
like we have a funny joke that Trinix, one of the PRs on Paradox, waits for the Falling Eagle to release an update so they can release a CK3 update.
Oh my
So we can
god.
then spend time patching it every single time. They never miss. We have to patch our update right after we release it
Oh
every
my
single
god.
time.
I would imagine too this last time around it seemed like they were updating since Roads to Power came out, like every other week or like almost every other day. I was wondering when you guys were going to update, but then I saw that post that you were just going to wait till after the next DLC, which I think makes sense because it was
Yeah,
too much. I mean, every
it's
mob
a
is breaking
it's a
basically.
hassle. It was a huge update. A lot of mechanics, and because we are a Roman mod and it's a Roman DLC, it was a huge conflict.
Oh, I'm
So we
sure.
took our time patching it. Yeah.
Do you? So you're so as one of the leads, do you actually do a lot of physical modding anymore? Or are you just organizing?
So up until summer, I did all of them. Yeah, not all. I'd say 70% of the coding.
Oh wow,
So yeah, I think on our GitHub, I still have the number one contributions. That's usually because, as I said, in 2022, 2023, I was the only coder in the mod. Now, people are catching up since I slowed down modding.
that's probably
But
good.
yeah, being a lead modder doesn't really mean that you're not doing physical modding.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because I was curious, and then this is a sort of jumping over. So you said you did coding. Do you remember? Have you been modding for a long time? Is this something that you just do as a hobby? Do you work on games anyway, or because I'm just curious where you got your start in modding?
I got my start in modding with CK3, with the Fallen Eagle. I
Really?
think because of COVID and everything, I just had a lot of time to spare, and I liked CK2 a lot. So when I bought CK3, I was like, why not mod it too?
That's really interesting. That's
Yeah, like I
that's
don't think
cool.
I played CK3. Like after, I don't think I have a single playthrough after 2022 in CK3.
Oh, because you've just been
It's just
modding.
modding. Yeah, 1,000 hours. 900 of them is modding.
Honestly, it's kind of like that when you make videos for it too. I feel like a lot of my hours that I have are me collecting footage or doing other things because when I make, like an introduction for a video, it'll take, I don't know, an hour to collect what will essentially be a minute of stuff. And I always look at my time and I'm like,
Yeah,
I probably have played half of that realistically.
yeah,
Yeah.
same thing. But
That's interesting. So you're stepping back. I was actually going to ask how you balance, being on a mod team that I mean you don't I assume you don't get any monetary incentive. So how do you balance that with your own personal life and working and stuff?
so I'm still in university.
Oh,
So
okay.
the first 4 years, I just balanced it with my studying. So I just study and mod when I'm like between classes usually.
Oh,
Now this term, I have a lot of stuff. I'm working like a part-time job and everything, so I had to pull back. I genuinely could not balance it. I still do a bit of modding, but yeah, it's a bit too much.
interesting. And so since you're in university, this actually jumps into another question. So why did you are you in school for history? Is history something that gravitates towards you or like are you really interested in Rome? Because I particularly was
Mm.
interested in why you chose to work on a Rome mod as opposed to like anything else. Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, so I am interested in history. It's
Mm-hmm.
like one of my hobbies for sure, reading history. Rome, not really. I'm interested in the time period, but not in Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And I found like joining the Fallen Eagle is a great way to learn much more for the time period. Like I doubled, tripled, quadrupled my knowledge in 363, 95, 476. These bookmarks, I
Mm-hmm.
knew them by heart now.
Oh, I would imagine you'd have
But
to. I mean, with all the
yeah,
stuff you'd have to code in.
but my degree isn't history. I'm studying engineering actually.
Oh well, that's really interesting. That's very different than a history degree, which
Yeah,
also, I mean,
yeah,
engineering is intensive with time. So again, it's impressive that you've managed to
exactly.
lead.
I'm sorry, but like history degrees, I had a choice. I was like, do I do what I like or do
Mm-hmm.
I do what gets me money? And I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
No offense to anyone doing history though.
No, history degree. I mean, it's fun, but no, you're absolutely right. I totally get it. I'm a person who has two
Yeah,
degrees, and one of them is not useful whatsoever, and it was the one I liked. So I understand. Oh,
yeah,
well, let's see. So this is a question now because you don't have a background in history. I'm assuming you have people who do. But how do you guys balance making a historical mod, especially about Rome? This is like a people are super boisterous and like opinionated and
yeah,
love Rome.
yeah,
How do you balance making it as both fun as possible and trying to make it as accurate as reasonably possible? Like you still want it to be a fun game, and there might be
yeah.
elements of reality that don't fit that. So how do you do it?
Question. Yeah. So we do have like a research team. 5, 6 people, I think, working just reading history and giving us suggestions for decisions and events. When I used to do the coding, I'd take those decisions, I'd tweak them, and then give them back my ideas, because usually their ideas were very historic, very grounded, which was not fun for a player, I think.
Mm.
It's a whole fight between me and the researchers. Always, I come to them with an idea. They say it's not historical. We keep fighting and fighting till we reach a middle ground. And
Do,
then the fan base, yeah, they just the Romo boost, you know.
yeah, that's what I was wondering. Do you have an example of something that you've recently, or like that you can think of? Oops, sorry. Do like that you've had to maybe try to like fight for that you wanted to see and maybe you did implement?
Yeah, I think one of the like ancient king, all of the ancient empire decisions actually. Every time I want to add like a found greater Assyria or like ancient, I don't care, you know.
Yeah.
Pirate. I have a decision that's like found the pirate empire of Illyria. I fought tooth and nail to put that decision in the mod. No one on the team thought it was historical, but it's funny.
It is
It's
funny.
really funny. I think.
No, and
Yeah,
that's I mean, if you want, especially in the spirit of, because you started playing with Crusader Kings 2, I feel like Crusader Kings 2 had a better balance of like trying to be a little
I
historical, but
agree.
also like being a little
Yeah,
ridiculous, which I think this game sort of lacks. So I think mods should definitely add those things.
I agree. I agree fully.
Yeah.
I don't know
So
if the people on my team would, but I agree.
keep up the good fight, I guess, as far as that goes. So, jumping to another question just about a historical mod, would you ever want to work on a non-historical mod, like a fantasy mod, or one based off of maybe like a book or something? Would you be interested in that?
Yes, of course. I am working on a Game of Thrones, but I am like a minor developer there. I don't
Oh,
work. I don't lead anything.
okay, that's
But
cool.
when they ask for me for help, I usually code there. Yeah, I'd say it's my favorite non-historic mod
Oh, Aegon's great. It's a
when I work on.
fantastic mod. Fantastic mod.
Yeah, of
And the team is
course,
really
great
nice.
team.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
very receptive.
team is
I've
really good.
yeah, they run a tight ship from what I hear. Um,
Hmm.
so
Yep.
for the Fallen Eagle, now that the next DLC comes out, I mean, it comes out at the time of recording this tomorrow. So what are the plans in the immediate, and then I guess like the next 6 months, if you can talk about that for the
Mm.
mod.
So main plan, think till now is just releasing the patch as soon as possible. Afterwards, we did have a plan to release the next bookmark in the winter. I don't think that will happen anytime soon. I think it will take a bit more time
Mm-hmm.
because of this DLC taking so much time patching.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, that's where our roadmap ends. Actually, we didn't really think of after the next bookmark. So
Just to
can't give you an
clarify,
answer. I don't know.
is the next bookmark the Islam one? Is that the one I'm thinking of?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, that's going to be definitely a big one, a challenging one too, because I know implementing the profit is going to be a
Yeah,
sensitive
it
topic.
starts. It starts right after his death. So
Oh, smart.
yeah, but it's still a lot of like events happening in like 20, 15 years that change drastically the region.
Yeah,
So it will be tough to simulate, I think.
yeah, I think
It's a
so
good
too.
challenge though.
That'll be really interesting. I think, especially for I think the one thing that I don't know how you feel, but the one thing I love about certain mods, especially the Fallen Eagle, is I feel like you guys have found a really good balance for making Crusader Kings difficult because CK3 is not a hard game. But you've sort of
Mm.
found ways to make scenarios that are hard, like the Soissons. I don't know how you say their name, but like that
Yeah,
Western Roman kingdom that gets absolutely
yeah,
wrecked
yeah.
by by the I can't remember what they're called. The like early Franks. Yeah,
The Franks, yeah.
yeah. They that's
I
a hard
think
star.
our main contribution for it to be difficult is the governments. I'd say that makes it much more challenging and many more variables you have to take into account when you do a decision.
Hmm.
Like, do I have to conquer this? But I know my competency will go down. I don't know, my vassals will be angry. It's a very, it's a much finer balance compared to CK3
Hmm.
when you add different governments.
No, absolutely. Do you have? So this is something I'm always curious about. I'm probably going to end up asking everybody this. So you're specifically a coder, so you might have had a greater hand in these. Do you have any of the because there's a few quest chains sort of that you could call it, I guess. You have like who the hell I'm trying to think, and of course I'm gonna blank now. But there are a couple characters that have like historical roots that they follow that you can do. I think like Attila
Yeah,
the Hun spawns. But do you have one that's like your favorite?
exactly. Oh, I'd say, I'd say the Visigoths,
Ooh,
395.
okay.
They have I think it was one of the first like chains we did, and it just close to my heart because of that.
That's
It's one of my
interesting.
favorite, and it's slept on.
I've not
I
done
don't think
that.
a lot of
Yeah,
people play it. Yeah, but it's a very fun chain.
I'll have to check that one out because I have this is going to be I guess a spoiler for a future thing. I have an idea for a Fallen Eagle video from like right after you guys
Ah,
update that I've been waiting to do
okay.
for a while. I actually think I pulled it for it on my channel like 2 months ago, but I was like I'm going to wait for the Fallen Eagle because it feels appropriate to do then. But I
Nice.
might have to make a second one on that little Visigoth. That sounds really cool.
Uh,
I just love it
okay.
from my
Interesting.
perspective as a player and somebody I guess who like plays a lot of mods in the community. I love when people incorporate like a lot of decisions and a lot of like personalized either cultural or character story elements because it makes the game feel more like less like a sandbox because I feel like a lot of us are I mean we're kind of over the sandbox, you can do that in the vanilla.
I
So
agree.
I think you want something
I
different when you
agree.
come to a mod and
Yeah,
I
I
I
think
love it.
every character should be different.
No,
Like especially the historical ones, they should be very, I don't know, like a story more than a sandbox. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, they should have
So,
a sense of agency, like a reason that you should be playing as them rather than you're just playing as a face. Like when I play Justinian, I want to feel that. Plus, now that you have the DLC, you can even do the what is it? Is it the blues and the greens or the reds and the greens? I can't remember the names of the factions for the
yeah, the
charioteers.
chariot.
Yeah, the revolt that
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so you can
It's gonna
definitely.
be Yeah, it's good. I'd say this DLC helped us a lot. This, of course, the patching, removing vanilla features or removing our features or merging them.
Mhm, mhm.
It's a challenge for sure.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I can't even imagine because as soon as I got the DLC access to it to do the tutorials, if you recall, I was overwhelmed by how much was added, especially in that region. And like one of the first things I thought of was I was like, the Fallen Eagle is going to have so much to do.
Yeah, yeah.
There was
Patching is one thing, merging is another.
yeah,
Like
it's an
making it
insane
make
amount.
sense.
It's an insane amount. I think it will definitely elevate the mod to a
Sure, yeah.
significant degree, especially because that is like it's the bread and butter, and now it has like proper systems in place, and plus some really great clothing. I know other people maybe don't care about the drip in the game, but I feel like they added some really nice looking stuff.
Of course, and models are very hard to come by these days, so
Yeah,
we thank Paradox for those.
I have heard that. Is that a common issue where like people who do modeling is that tough to find in the modding community?
Of course, because coding, I'd say anyone could do coding, but modeling is creative. It's really, really, it's hard to find someone that wants to do modeling and especially wants to do modeling basically for free.
Yeah. Is there any so other mods do this? Does the Fallen Eagle have any sort of like Patreon donation that they do to like give certain
Do
people
we do
incentive to
have a Patreon?
Okay, so you do have a Patreon. I'll try to remember to link that in the description. Somebody hold me to that if I forget in a comment.
Great.
Just because I want to make sure everybody gets supported, I'll try to include everybody's little links down below. But
Thank you.
so how do you balance that between the team? Because how many people are on the team? You said like maybe 10, 15.
Let's say yeah, 10, 15 right now.
Okay. And so how does that work? Like how dispersing the donations essentially?
The donations go all for the mod.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, none of them go to the first people because if we're 10, 15, like every person would get too little to matter. Let's say we pull them up, put them for the mod.
Yeah.
And that's the policy we've been on.
So how do you mean when it goes to the mod? I'm just curious.
So instead of getting a modeler on our mod, we just commission others. We commission people outside the community. We get art, music, stuff like that.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay,
It's
yeah. So you're like you do it for like commissions and stuff. That makes sense, honestly.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah, that's really smart. I honestly had never considered that as a means of using Patreon. I legitimately assumed it was just as like a way to keep maybe some really good modders around who are like, oh, I don't know, I think I'm gonna walk, and they're like, well, wait, here's a little,
Well,
you know.
that's a good idea. And like I've seen some people do that successfully. But since I don't think any of us have, we don't need an incentive to work on the mod.
Yeah.
Just rather put the money on in the mod itself.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think that that's sort of a morally, not morally gray, but it's a sort of complicated situation that can quickly spiral into
Yeah.
something that's not great. So I was curious about that, and I have a couple other people that I know have Patreons that I wanted to ask about that, like how they do it, because some of these teams, as I'm sure you've seen from the inside, they're pretty big.
Yep. Yeah.
You know, like
Huge.
they're like several dozen, sometimes over 100 people, and I'm like, how would you possibly manage that? But so that is interesting, and you guys have some great art too for the Fallen Eagle that
Yeah.
you've commissioned.
Ancient Conqueror.
Yeah.
Ancient Conqueror actually does most of our art. Like, appreciate him genuinely for doing that. Most of that. It elevates our game. It elevates the immersion, everything.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that any mod that can add their own music, their own art, it's fantastic. The only thing that sucks for me is that as a creator, I turn all the music off because some mods will have licensed music and it's not it's always really frustrating
Um,
if you record.
all of our sound music is made in house,
Oh,
so you don't have to worry about that. Yeah,
that is
you have a
interesting.
soundtrack on YouTube now.
I'm gonna have to go look now. I'm gonna have to look. If I find that, if I remember that, hold on. Let me write this note. I'm gonna write a note. Write a note on my hand because I don't have a piece of paper because I'm professional. I'm gonna look up Fallen Eagle OST and Patreon so that I can make sure to link those. So I guess in closing, because I don't want to keep anybody over 30 minutes, and I feel like I've gotten most of the questions that I've wanted to ask. But do you have any advice for somebody who'd want to get into modding? Like, because you're somebody who just came in to CK3, no modding experience, and now you've been a lead on a
Yeah.
team and doing it for years.
So I'd say join a team, not start your own mod, unless you have a foundation to work on. Browse through the CK3 files. They're the best way to learn. Change stuff in the vanilla files. See how it reacts in the game. That's the best way to learn modding. And find someone in a team so that you can like he can teach you the ropes.
Mm-hmm.
That's my advice.
And so, what do you guys mod through? Is it like GitLab or GitHub or whatever?
Actually, funny story. Before we had GitHub, we used to just so we just send all of our files on Discord and
Oh,
just make sure the guy that has the Steam ownership, whatever, just move our stuff from Discord into the mod, and it never worked. He'd always mess up because I cannot give a person a file and tell him go to mod slash the fallen eagle slash, and he'd perfect it in every like 20 files. It was terrible
oh,
before
oh my
GitHub.
god.
Yeah,
That sounds truly atrocious. Do you have any
it was.
do you have any hard like so you've had a favorite quest chain that you've done. Do you have anything that you're like particularly proud of that you've put into the mod that was maybe really difficult, or it was something that you were like, yeah, I did this. I birthed this out of my own, will, I guess.
Yeah, competency. It's still my favorite mechanic just because of the design of it. I think it's one of our like best designed elements, and it's really in depth, and it was really difficult to do. So every time I open the Fallen Eagle, I just go to the competency tab to say, yeah, I did that. You know?
Yeah, no, I do like that. I also enjoy the Senate feature as well. I've been a big
Oh
fan of
yeah,
that. Yeah,
that was amazing.
it's cool and it's a lot more immersive. I feel like honestly, I thought Roads to Power was going to utilize something like that too. So I guess you guys have still elevated it beyond what they had even incorporated. But I like the admin system a
Yeah,
lot. I think it's fun.
yeah. I think that it was very not fun to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for coming on here, talking to me for about 20, 23, 24 minutes. It's
Yeah.
been fun. Obviously I've spoken to you periodically, but it's nice to hear the people behind the mod. And do you have anything you'd like to say in closing at all?
No, just play the Fallen Eagle. Don't play anything else. Thank you for having me.
You have a good one. What's up, everybody? It's Soul, and up next we have Lonely Night S from the Godherja team here with us today. How are you, Lonely?
Good. How about you?
I'm well. I'm well. We haven't spoken in a while, but we've obviously talked a lot, collaborated a lot in the past. So I have a ton of questions that might be a little more in depth related to Godherja, just because I feel like I know a little bit more about the mod itself.
Well, I'll be happy to answer any of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one, I know from personal experience, like working with you, that you've been doing this modding thing for kind of a while. Do you remember the first mod that you can remember making, and what was it for?
Yeah, God, I mean, I guess my first start would be like in the editor of Heroes of Might and Magic 3 back in the day. I was able to do that before I could walk. My mom would have me sit on her lap while she messed around in it. And legitimately, I was making maps before I could even stumble around, which probably irrevocably ruined me. But the
Well,
first major mod that I can think of would probably be for CK2, um, which probably back in like 2011 or so.
mhm.
I would have been a little teenager, but a friend in the Half-Life 2 roleplay server I spent my life in was like, "Hey, have you heard about this new Crusader Kings game? And if you pre-order it, you get the first one." It was such a deal. Um, but I got it and I really liked it, and I started being like, I want to add myself into this game, and I want to make a little event chain and blah blah blah. And before I knew it, the rest of my life had been decided. It was actually pretty dark. It
Yeah.
was yeah, I broke bad.
Oh my god. Well, yeah, because I was going to ask, you could have probably made this mod for, because you've modded other games, obviously. You could have made
Mhm.
Godherja for, or Godherja, however you want to say it, people who are listening.
I've
Um,
never heard anyone say it that way, but
I haven't
yes.
either, but I've heard, but I know some people. I've seen their comments, and they'll be like, "Why are you pronouncing the J so
Yeah, they're called
hard?"
sickos.
I was like, "Oh my god, dude! I'm just trying to,
Deranged
I'm just trying to
fuckers.
read. You have no idea how hard it is to sit here and be like, oh man, this, these words that somebody made up. I'm gonna try
Those
my
are not the
best."
type of people you want subscribing to your channel. Get
Oh
rid of
my
them.
god. So why did you choose Crusader Kings, I guess, as the home of Godherja, as opposed to something else like Europa or anything else?
Oh, well, it's fantasy, you know? I mean, I grew up, I mean, it was really like a return to home sort of thing. Like, I grew up in Crusader Kings too.
Hmm.
And when you know, I did TNO back in the day, I did all that. And that was something. And when we were finishing, CK3 was coming out, and I'd gotten started modding in CK2. And always just really like loved fantasy. That was always like my preferred genre.
Hmm.
And TNO, all of its strengths, its biggest thing was it was basically like a fantasy book within an alternate history within a video game. And so it just felt really natural sliding back into CK3. And then when I did get to CK3, not only was it much more of a relief to be doing something like that, as opposed to like alternate history where everything has to be an argument to get anything like put through, and if something's not correct, blah blah blah.
Hmm.
But when I started doing that, the community was so much more chill. There was so much less fighting. The co-op went well. I liked my team, and really, it was just like, all right, this is fine. Like, I'm just gonna stay here. This is where I'm happy. Like,
So yeah, so it was like a comfort thing. It was just like I like the people that I'm working with. I like the game
yeah, I
as
mean,
a
the
base.
initial mod was sort of like, okay, I can finally do a proper fantasy mod that feels nice. So
Hmm.
like initially, but then after a while, it was like, oh no, this is just all around, not just comfort, just more fulfilling, I guess.
Hmm. No, absolutely. So why? So do you recall? Because this is something I've been wondering. Do you recall when you had the first like inkling of Godherja in your brain? Do you remember like where you were or what it was in
Oh yeah, I
particular?
mean, it depends exactly on what you mean. I mean, the lore primer goes over it a bit. It depends on what we mean by inkling, because like the first very little ideas I would have gotten around when I first started doing CK2 mods, and I had like a total conversion I never finished over there called an Asarian Tale that I used to
Hmm.
put on the Paradox forum. And so that'd be like the first little thing, I guess. But then years later,
Well,
and then we started talking on the TNO team about what Imperator mod we were gonna make if we wanted to make an Imperator mod. And I drew the first version of the Godherja map talking about like that. And then I came up with the idea of like, oh, what if there had been like a World War I, and like the gas attacks were like fantasy gas attacks, and the gas never went away, and now it's a post-apocalypse, and there's monsters in the gas, and there's like knights that are like those German soldiers with gas masks on horses and stuff, and like stuff like that. And that became a big part of like the original idea, and that was like getting closer. And then finally, the big thing that like locked it in was I was in talks with PDX and so on, and we were at a point where I had the team getting together, and I was like, I just need to get like I need like a proposal sheet. I need to be able to like summarize this entire setting and like the mod I'm gonna make, and like get my team organized. So like, I wanted to figure it out right there. And I had been working. I was doing a travel job, so I was like in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky or something, and I was driving on my rental car, and the song "Troll Abundant" by Ivor came on,
Okay.
and something about the dark trees, and I just had like, it was like a vision entered my head of like the fog in the forests, and like these
Right.
knights with like dragon like armor, which would be adversarians fighting these barbarian warriors, and then the fog sweeps in and they all start running from it, and like it zooms out, you can see like the coast is burning, and it's like that was all the way deep in the woods and so on, and all of that came to me on this like drive. And so then I sat down in the hotel room and just pumped out like the first 4 or 5 pages that were the original lore document, and the next thing you know, the rest is history.
Yeah,
Just
no.
expanded from there.
So did you ever consider making it, instead of doing like a mod, did you ever consider writing it down as like a book or something?
Well, modding has always been, my creative release.
Mm.
I mean, I've always wanted to write a book. I have like so many half-written books,
I can only
especially
imagine.
half-written Godherja books. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just the thing about modding is like I can instantly just see it in front of me. Like it appeases my ADHD way more. The projects don't have to be so long term. Like I can do smaller projects that build up to a long one. As opposed to writing, where it's just like write the book or die. Like
Yeah.
that's really the option there. Write a shorter book or die, whatever. But you gotta write the book.
Yeah, no, and that's definitely the problem, is even when you write the book, now you have to do the tremendous task of making it good.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, you got to do the same thing when you do the mod, and I'll figure that out someday. But like,
Oh my god.
actually, just getting that baseline off and going like, oh, I did something is just so much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how do you keep it all organized? I mean, obviously, as somebody who has extensively read a lot of this lore, I know that it's elaborate, it's dense, it's enormous, in fact. And I have no idea if you just have like your house is covered in pieces of paper that you just cross reference with wire or something. You look like Charlie Day, and It's Always Sunny. I don't know, like, how do you do it?
I feel like people are disappointed when I say we don't. But like, there's a method to the madness, sort of. So like, the thing is, I found, especially during the TNO years, TNO also did it, and that was a huge mess. But that it's really hard to maintain those documents when you're also like an ever growing mod, and you always have different people coming in, and you're always adding different lore. And if you're like me, you get like a random lore idea and you really want to make that a thing and like expand on that or talk to people about it. But you don't want to be like, okay, I'm going to go sit down, find this document, write down blah blah blah, get all this set up, and like you want to keep things at least on the Godherja team, we want to keep things fast, and like, so team member just gets an idea in their head, they're welcome to just come drop it into the chat, and we can talk about it and like expand the lore that way. Because otherwise we just don't want to stifle.
So,
And so what we do is that we've realized the easiest way is, with me as like the sort of chief editor, the chief like making sure the lore is consistent in my head, making sure it's to my vision. I can sort of keep things focused that way. We have our senior team members who all basically know the broad strokes and like a bunch of the tighter lore. We try to make it so whenever we type up something, we leave some title or something to make it easily findable in Discord. Just search for it. And then otherwise, we generally go on a policy where like once it hits the mod proper, like once we implement it into the mod, that's when it's proper lore. And if we have like a place where we put down everybody's name and like a little thing about them, we put it there. If we have a sheet where we like write down every single legion, because we have a few sheets, we'll put it there. But until then, like, we don't need to collate everything necessarily, as long as everybody has the broad strokes and I know the bigger things, search for the details as we need them. That's generally how we do it.
Okay. Has there been anything that you've added that you've then taken out, that you were like, oh, this doesn't fit with new things that we've made?
Oh no.
Oh, really?
That's one of the things where, in order to work with the system and make it work, when we started dev, we built like an elastic philosophy where we really, really, really did not want the mod to ever go into the endless death cycle that it seems so many other mods do, where it's just endless reworks, where you're just fixing things or just rewriting things. You had lore 2 years ago, and now you don't like that lore. So now all you're doing for your lore 2 years later is just rewriting that lore 2 years ago, and then 2 years after that, oh boy, we don't like that lore anymore.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so we have this philosophy that one, but there's the two things I think that really make the idea of the looser planning work, and that's one, the lore is intentionally written so that things are like hazy and mysterious, and not everything we say is necessarily true, and that like time is all messed up in the settings. So things might have been true but might be different now. In that way, so like even if we do write ourselves into a corner completely, we normally have a few like ways we can emergency pool. And even worse comes to worst, if we had planned none of that and we'd have no emergency ways to pool, we can ultimately say, oh, the universe broke. This happened. We haven't had to go that far yet,
Right.
but like we can drag and break things like the Elder Scrolls if we really want to.
Yeah, I guess that is a method. Yeah, that makes sense.
But before we get there, before that happens, we have a pretty big no rewrites policy, where like if something is lore, like it's properly gotten in like that, then it's a lot more interesting to find like what ways you can make that work with current lore and find some middle ground, make some new lore to bridge the gap between the two of them, than it is to just say like, hey, sorry everybody, that's out, this is in. So one example, probably one of the biggest ones, is that we used to have when we first started writing up all the emperors for Adversaria in history.
Right.
We had accidentally mixed up two of them in a bunch of places. Autocratia, Thacia, and Aliatus were both like credited with a bunch of stuff the other one did, and we mixed up like saying their names when we were mentioning like their birthdays and stuff. So like technically they were alive. We couldn't just say they were the same person. They'd have been alive for 400 years before and after like different other autocrators. So that ended up being, we were discussing that, we decided like what if autocrators believed like, what if the adversarians believed that like different emperors could reincarnate? They would like the different emperors would like specify like, no, this is my favorite emperor, I'm reincarnated directly from them, and then even like starts like re-chiseling like their dedications or like reshaping the faces on their statues, say like, no, that's me, like that was me, that's what I did all the her stuff too.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so like stuff like that, and like that's a lot more interesting than if we had just said, hey, never mind, she did all this, she did all that, split. Like yeah, and that's just sort of how we roll. If we ever hit a corner, we just try to work our way out of it like that.
Interesting. So I know you guys are working right now on the end of canon, right? The 1298 start. How has, so this was a question, this is something that I've been wondering. I've as I've said, I've covered the lore and I've been following the mod for a little while now. Do you, because there's a ton of start dates that are planned. Do you actually expect to get to all those, or do you think that you're going to have to narrow the scope a little bit? It doesn't sound like it.
Yeah, and I mean that's the plan is that scope. We're gonna, if the mod ever hits 1.0, it'll be with those start dates. Now, maybe the mod will never hit 1.0. That happens. But we planned with like Godherja being evergreen mod. It'll be worked on as long as people want to work on it. We released very early so that we wouldn't have to be like, okay, we have to cut down if we want to make release. We always wanted to be building up with the community instead of like cutting back to get it to everybody. So I don't see any personal reason, like, why do we have to cut these things?
Right.
All of the lore, most of the lore, the first basis was me sitting in that empty file and going like, okay, I'm going to come up with like an interesting big thing that happens a few times a century for every region so that it would work. And so now we have a list of start dates where it's like every century some group has like their big thing happening that year, and it'd be a shame not to cover all of it eventually.
Oh no, I agree.
What?
Oh, I said I agree. It was just a concern of me, like as a player and somebody who obviously wants the mod to succeed. I was like, are you going to actually do it? But it sounds like you have the plan to fulfill that. Anyway,
really doing the history and stuff like that is so much easier than like doing the actual modding. Now, mind you, we make it a bit harder because we've always said that every start date we want to have like a unique thing, like it has its own sort of feature that it's like centered around, even if that feature shows up elsewhere, it has like its own mechanic or whatever. And so like, or big event. So in the current start date, the big thing is the Empiric, the migrants coming in, cleaning out the rest of Adversaria, setting up the new world. In 1298, the new thing will be the Right Wars. And so it'll be coming with a ton of content for that and expanding that, making that more complex and dynamic. And, you know, those are already it. You can already play the Right Wars just in sort of like a very straight, narrow, this is how it'll be set up in 1298 version. But that's sort of the example of why we think that idea is good, because all of that content we'll be adding for the Right Wars to make 1298 as interesting and complex as it can also get backported, and so you'll be able to start in 1254 and recreate the exact same thing, or like get all that dynamic content and go a whole different path if you want to.
So how do you I guess because there's going to be now different start dates, the challenge is always like, can you incorporate the additions from the other start dates into like an earlier one, or is it just going to be like, oh, you're playing as the Empiric start date 1254, you're not going to necessarily get as rich of the features of 1298, or are you going to try and make those just happen organically if you happen to start earlier?
We never code anything with it being like, or at least we try not to code anything with it being like, yes, you started in 1254, so you get the special version of all the good content. We want all of the content we make to be able to appear naturally. So ideally, when we code everything for 1298 and all of that stuff, if you play through 1254 and every group happens to settle down in the exact same spot, and they ended up, all their rulers decide to join the specific same rights and so on and so forth, all the 1298 content should be 100% possible for that to happen. You should be able to just, you know, obviously it'd be 1 in a million with the sandbox, but you should be able to just recreate the events of future bookmarks by just playing naturally and having that happen. And ideally, we also want to eventually make content for, you know, if different stuff happens, you know, oh, what if, you know, this group might settle down here in 1298 and have like their whole right and be like a big part of it. But what if in 1254, like a whole different group settles there? Well, maybe we'll make content for them too if they settle there, you know, make different parallel structures. Obviously, stuff like that will take even longer. Won't be like immediate thing we'll do, but we don't see any reason not to expand content in every possible direction, right?
Right. No, that makes sense. So with the 1298, is there going to be anything? I don't want to harp on 1298 too much because I don't want to spoil anything. That's too crazy. But we know, we know the fog is coming. The fog happens. Like the fog eaters, are they going to be expanded? I don't assume they'll be playable. I would assume they're going to be antagonistic. But is there?
Fog eaters were actually, they used to be playable. They've always been intended to be playable again. It's just more mechanic. The biggest bulk of that stuff is actually waiting for before 1290, before 1254 bookmarks, where we're going to have mechanics for migrating and settling and stuff like that is a much bigger focus. And then that'll be in the future ported to like fog eaters and stuff so they can properly migrate around.
Interesting. Okay. So it'd be like no, go ahead. Oh, I was gonna say, so it'd probably be like with like a Nomad update. If we get one of those in the near future, it'd probably be related to that.
Yeah, we've been talking about it into the Foglands update for a long time, similarly to the update that'll eventually bring the Redlanders up to snuff. Not Redlanders, Lichdom's playability.
So hype.
And yeah, we have a bunch of different there's like some teasers that we've posted to the Discord before about like complete redesign of the Fog Eater tribes, stuff like that. So they'll be very fun to interact with and play. And we've also been in talks of you know, in lore 1298, the fog hasn't moved substantially. It's not clear if it will, and it's up to the player and the settings they choose. It does. That's the canon ends there at 1298, so it's 100% player.
Yeah.
We do have some plans to maybe add like it's the first time reveal, I guess, but we do have some plans to like maybe add like a small new region in a few provinces on the border of the fog of 1254. The idea being that they're not fogged yet, but then in the beginning of the game and over the course of 10 years or so, they become fogged. And so that'd be like, you know, so the border isn't identical between the two. 1254, 1298 might maybe introduce a bit of new lore. But yeah, but otherwise, the fog is not going to kill everybody currently unless you want it to.
So do you plan on, and this is not that it's not that pressing, but with the Redlands, when you guys did that update, it had a really beautiful like visual texture on the map, and then also the when you did like the sun death thing. I actually don't know if that's been like fully integrated or not, but obviously the world changes. Are you gonna have like a physical fog show up on the map? Is that a planned?
Yeah, we used to actually in earlier versions. We had a physical fog effect. We just didn't really like how it looked, and then we met a person who was like, "Oh, I'll make you a custom fog particle effect to do particles." And it was like awesome. So we got rid of that old crap. We're like, ready when you are. Then they vanished.
Oh,
So it's still in the plans. One day we want to bring back our dynamic fog effects. What you see with sun death is actually an example of a few different things, but it's messing with the lighting system and also messing with the shader map. And that's all thanks to Terrapass, who we've shouted out before. He's our shader guy, but that's the same exact system that allows for our custom terrain system we showed off at ModCons past that will let you like restore Chemstar. If you actually right now, Chemstar not being grassy and the Lichdoms being the Lichdoms like all undead. In game when you see those aren't actually like painted on by hand really. Well, they are, but they're not like as a normal map works. Console command is basically run when the game starts. That switches them over. But if we commented that out, we removed that one line from the on-start files in the game. The Lichdoms would be green. So would Chemstar.
That's
It's that easy.
wonderful.
It's that easy for us to switch it over. Just about making content for it, really. And we had time to do it for the Redlands, so.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. So this was something that I wanted to ask. So with Godherja or any major mod, like it's obviously a lot of its updates are very dependent on whatever DLC or like features are being added. Do you guys have a lot of interaction with Paradox? I actually forgot to ask Wrench this on our call. I asked him it after the fact, and he said that it depends. But I wanted to hear like specifically for you guys, like, do you have a lot of interaction with Paradox, like when with updates or with assistance with integrating features?
We have a very friendly relationship with the PDX. We get a lot of help making sure everything works and like getting into things early. I don't remember exactly the terms of my NDA and so on with PDX, so I don't want to like
no worries
or anything.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it there. But yeah, we have a very positive. It's very much better than you'd expect from like most companies. When it comes to modders, they really do give full support.
I do worry people will be a little like worried about breaking NDAs. So yeah, I guess I won't ask beyond that. But here's a question. So this is something that I asked Wrench as well. So you guys have a Patreon, which I'm going to link in the description of this. And you've been very transparent about using that for, personal reasons in the past. What would you, so besides using it for that, what do you guys use it for? Do you use it for like commissions? How do you feel about using a Patreon, like to assist the mod team in general? I don't know how big the mod team is. I probably should have asked that. I think you guys have like several dozen members. It's huge. But like, what do you envision?
I would say, like 2 or 3 dozen, maybe. I'd say probably less super active members, but yeah.
So with the Patreon, like, what is your, I guess, intention with it beyond obviously like assisting with the team? Like, is that normally what it goes for?
Right. Yeah. So my thing is I make sure the team's cool with it. I use it for my rent right now. Been going through it, but and that's with everybody, making sure everybody on the team is cool with it. Nobody else has any financial thing they can help with, that it can help with. Try to be 100% ethical with that. Full disclosure with it. When I'm not, struggling to pay rent, I tend to put money straight back into the mod. So it's commissioning art, commissioning models, buying models. We have tons of the Godherja models were purchased from elsewhere, then either retextured or just full on put straight into the mod. I have a few hundred of those I bought for us over the years. Stuff like that. The biggest thing is going to be commissioning art once I'm back on my feet, so hopefully soon, within a month or two. But going into loading screens, going to new models, stuff like that, finding artists that we want to work with and that can match sort of what we want to do visually, but reasonably as well.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So with modeling, actually, because I had asked the Fallen Eagle about this as well, and they were talking about how it can be difficult to find modelers. Don't you guys have a 3D modeler on the team, or am I mistaken?
We have a lead modeler. They're more of an oversight role. They sometimes do some good work for us, but they have other priorities,
Right.
and that's fine. But we don't really have anybody dedicated that just like pumps them out like you would see in some teams. A Game of Thrones, we hate them. God bless them, but like they I think because of the IP they do it for, it's a lot easier for them to like attract a more a larger coterie of modelers,
Right.
and or in like the you ever see like a Total War mod, and it's like, oh yeah, our modeler created 87 models yesterday, and we had to fire them because there was nothing left to make, and it was like, okay, like, wow, I
Jeez.
wish I was you guys.
Wish
Or
I had that
Skyrim
problem.
mods are the same way, where it's just like drowning in modelers, but they never come over here. But it is what it is.
Oh my god. Well, yeah, I guess that is like a challenge, I guess, is trying to so this is something that I was also wondering, and I think this is a good segue into that. Did you have any trouble getting people to join the team or have interest in the mod because it is like your own IP, like it's something that you made, as opposed to like doing, I don't know, I remember Dragon Age or like Heroes of Might and Magic are inspirations. As opposed to doing something like that, did you have any difficulty getting people to want to try or be a part of the mod?
I guess. I mean, I guess I didn't think too much about it. Like P&O was in real life, like it was an alternate history, but it was also like a very much from my own brain, fantasy world almost without it was written and everything. So I think there was already some experience in baiting in people and in attracting people. And I came over with a few team members from there, and most of them didn't stay around very long. But like, I already did have a bit of a foot in the door with the team before I had to start attracting people. The Godherja team has always been like the core team has always been pretty small, but we've had a very consistent like team of seniors
Mm-hmm.
on the team forever. So once those guys were all in, and we had a few people were reliable men and women, everybody else that we could fit in. Everything else has always been like, oh, we really need to attract members. We're dying and we have very few people, but we still have our core six.
Mm-hmm.
Or, oh, yeah, we have so many people right now, and it's like a struggle to manage them all, but we still have our core six. So, like, um, that's always like made the worst of it fine. Like, we've never had too much of a worry about it. And
Mm-hmm.
nowadays, for the past few years, we've had much more of a mentality of like, we just like working together. If people come, they come.
Yeah.
If people don't come, they don't come.
Yeah.
But we just really want like chilling and developing.
Yeah, from what I've seen on the back end, just because I'm obviously, I lurk every once in a while in your little dev Discord, and I see you guys chatting, and it seems like everybody who's active has been active for at least as long as I've been looking at it. So it's nice to see. But this is to segue again. So we've talked a little bit about TNO. I wasn't really going to bring it up too much just because there's a lot of drama behind it, but because of that drama, you're the lead of this mod. How do you, and this is just as general advice to other people who might be leads of other mods, like how do you manage being the lead of a mod amidst controversy? Like it's something that I think happens more often than not because people expect you to have opinions about certain things or, to act in a certain way. Like how do you do it personally?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, I think some amount is just always going to happen. Like, there's always going to be somebody who starts a fight in a chat. At some point, you'll have to like make some sort of statement, one way or the other, or dead in the middle on like Israel and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
just because it's the nature of communication. And once you've said something, then that's it. Um, so I think to an extent, it is natural, and you do have to be prepared for it. Really, I think the biggest things is just being like not being a dick, which I've struggled with, but being just, fully like open about what the rules and expectations are. If you're going to be banning somebody, it should be like a last resort, right? So like just make sure it's been made clear like, hey, I've asked you to stop arguing about it or stop like taking this stance or like whatever this many times. If you do it again, we'll have to ban you, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just to make it so that nobody's like sided or feels the need to go off and like, I'll start the anti Godherja Discord so that me and all my friends can talk about how much we fucking hate blah 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 because it's
Oh my
great
God.
injustice.
Right.
But really, not being a Hearts Iron 4 modder is probably the best thing you can do to avoid drama.
Oh yeah.
If once you've made that choice, everything else is a lot easier, honestly. Again, if you have been a Hearts Iron 4 modder, then you've already survived the trenches of Verdun, like every other war after some baby shit.
Oh
Like you'll
my
be
God.
fine.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I'd say it's just like just focus on modding. Like that's your thing. You can chat it with your team, chat politics with your team, but don't let your community chat politics because there's no good reason they to be chatting politics on the server. And past that, just try to be chill. Try not to ban people.
Mm-hmm.
Keep everyone happy.
No,
It's
absolutely.
hard, but it's like one of those things where like Tino was like drama the mod. It was an unending drama. It was just, talking with different like groups about drama. It was a thing. And then Godherja has been relatively Godherja on the CK3 team modding scene has been so much more chill that I almost feel like I don't even know what I did differently. Like, it's really I think it's just about finding the right game and then building the right community that fosters a lack of drama in your life.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. So you've mentioned obviously a lot about like being a mod lead and like being a modder, and that's your creative outlet. Have you ever wanted to, or has the opportunity arisen? Maybe you probably can't talk about it if it has, but to make Godherja into like its own proper IP, where you make a game unto itself, like its own solo game, or do you expect it to remain a mod?
There's been some talks and like some work on the team about like putting something together, but it's really just a whole different shift in like skill sets and priorities. I would love it nothing more than to like set up a full indie team and like blah 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 and pump that out. But one, we on the team, it's a lot harder to say people like, oh, once a week or every few weeks, I go on the Godherja team in this thing I know, and I pump out like an event or some writing or something, and it's in there. It's a whole other to say like, hey, learn C#, learn Python, learn Godot,
Mm-hmm.
come work for me. You will release nothing for X amount of years, but eventually release a game, maybe. Do that on top of already doing the mod, presumably. Right?
Oh, yeah, it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and maybe study will get there. We'll figure that out. But it's not the sort of thing that's an easy transition. I think for some game companies, that have their roots in modding, it's easier because the games they mod tend to be much more they prepare you much more for that. Like Long War for XCOM is the big famous one, right? That now do Terra Invicta. But the thing is that if you've ever done XCOM modding, you probably know that their coding system. If you're one of the 3 people who have done both CK3 and fucking XCOM 2 modding, you'll know their modding tends to be a lot closer to code than it is to anything else because it's much more of just like, oh yeah, we just made the code of the game open to you if you like download Unreal Engine or whatever. As opposed to CK3, where it's like learning specifically paradox scripting and learning blah, 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 and all this. And so there's a lot less of an immediate transfer of skills. So there has been some work on it, some talk on it. Maybe it'll happen, but like I think it's a bit more uphill process than people might think.
So do you think because Paradox with modding Paradox games is a lot more specific to Paradox, do you think that's limiting if you are a modder who like somebody who wants to maybe get into modding other games in general? Do you think that modding Paradox games will put you at a disadvantage, or will it at least get you a good baseline?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on what we're talking about. Are you modding games because you want to be an indie game developer eventually? Or are you modding games because you like modding games? If you like modding games, it's easier to learn. It's fun to work with. I actually really enjoy working with PDX script. It's what I grew up in. Really, it took me until like a year or two ago to start being able to write out like basic code after years of trying. But like PDX script, I've been doing since I was like 12, 13. Like it's just such a doable thing. And I think one thing that is hard for people to get, but that's really important to realize is that like there's also the fact that if it wasn't as easy it is to learn, it wasn't set up like it is, and it wasn't like as less fully featured as a coding language necessarily. And mind you, it's getting closer every year. Like CK3 is way more complex than it was back in the day when I first learned it. But we wouldn't have a team, right? It's a lot easier to attract like every other 16-year-old who wants to code. I shouldn't say that. That was like Tito. Nowadays, it'd be 20s. But every random person who gets some interest in the game, it's a lot easier to teach them and like entice them in and like show them like the ropes and whatever than it would be to like, hey, just learn to code. Like if you want to work with us. So there might not necessarily be a mod if it was easier, but so I wouldn't say it's limiting. I'd say it's a fantastic beginner's tool and it's very powerful if like you just want to do that. If you want to switch off, it won't give you all the tools you need to like just jump straight into C# or something like you might with some engines.
Mhm.
But on the flip side, like if you've always struggled to learn to code, PDX script could be a fantastic way to like get your foot in the door for that and get the concepts down.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good. That's good to know then, because I'm sure people who are listening to this, the people who would listen to this are going to people who are interested in modding. That's kind of who I'm aiming this towards. I'm not a modder, but I obviously interact with you guys a lot, so I wanted to get that out. So this is something I've wanted to ask you, and I've never asked, and I'm shocked that I haven't. This is totally unrelated to that because my segues are, super great. Do you have a favorite aspect of the mod, like lore-wise, that you just love writing it for it? Like, for me, I'm a huge Chevalier and like Ward Knight fan, but do you have an area that you're like, oh yeah, this is my baby, besides the whole mod itself, of course?
Yeah, too many. Everybody on the team has their own babies that they're allowed to just like go free on. And I have a few. Chevalier have always been the main person, so Chevalier is basically like one of my biggest babies. I've had like editorial control there forever.
Mhm.
Pedicus Red specifically was like one night of passion for me, and like it's
Goat.
been there since.
Classic.
The Iconists and the Iconis rebellions from lore has always been a thing like I constantly return to.
Mhm.
So they're probably up there too. Adversary as a whole, really it's hard to specify. The
Mhm.
whole mod, unlike TNO, where they ended up being like things split up, and then I ended up not being as involved in some areas than others. My mind is involved in some areas in TNO as much as I am in others, but like I really like everywhere. Like everything is always just really interesting to me.
Mm.
Um, the least connected I am is probably like parts of Ceridon and Kashira and stuff. But even then, like I'm foot in the door and I'm always talking to the team about it and seeing what they're saying, and I'm always super interested in it. So, it's hard to really choose one. I like everything in my mod.
That's a great way to be, but adversary of bad, just so everybody know. Anyway, moving forward, what is the team's plan for Godherja? Because the Patreon, at least at the time of recording this, the Patreon build just dropped, and I played it the other day, and I had fun with it. What are your plans like now that Chapter 3 is over? The last DLC comes out tomorrow. Again, at the time of recording this, I have played it. It's it's enjoyable. What are the plans for the mod? Because we will presumably have like 3-4 months where there won't be any DLCs that you'll have to worry about.
Yeah, finally. Right now we're working getting this patch finished, getting everything finished up, and I'm working with the team on finally getting the rest of the commissions that I was commissioned for swept through. So we have people on those. After those, and while I'm working on those, the big thing that the team is working on that this patch interrupted really is 1298, getting that bookmark out.
Mhm.
And really, the big thing about it is once we get one bookmark out, I think the others will be easier because history modding is the easiest part of it, and I think we'll start sweeping through. So our plans is to focus on 1298, get that out, and then really we always have so much plans. We have the policy we always talk about where all lore that we write is just we only write it with the idea that we're going to make a gameplay at some point. It's
Mhm.
written with that idea. So as you know, there's so much lore, which means
Oh
there's
my
so much
god.
gameplay. There's so much stuff to do forever. But we're gonna work on 1298. Maybe the Liches, maybe Fog Eaters. We'll see what other things take our passion. And then after that, maybe we've talked about going wild, and instead of doing another bookmark at like within the last 100 years, we might go all the way to the beginning to like 36 IS or whatever.
Oh wow.
Yeah, just show people we can, I guess. But
That would be interesting.
yeah, that's
Per
the sky's the limit, I guess, is the point, right? We can just sort of do anything.
Yeah, you could do whatever you want. Although personally, if you wanted this tomato's opinion, this professional tomato's opinion, I would like to see the War of the Heretical Princes because I want to see the champion on the map. But that's just me. I digress. It's fine if you don't do that right away, but I feel like with Landless now, it would be a fun little experience.
Yeah, I want everything. There's so much stuff. Like I said, like everything started out with me just writing out, let's make a cool thing happen twice a century, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And there's every century you got like something where it's like, it'll be so cool to see that. It'll be so cool to see that. For me, I think that might be the most of that for me personally. Might be the Cartharati Wars, where it's like when you probably have just like a full on 2 multi-continent empires with some custom system where it's like they can't even fit within one empire title. So there are like 7 empire titles that have like a special relationship with each other and act like they're in one and blah, blah, blah. You just have like 2 of those ramming into each other with peak Godherja, like magic content. So they're all just throwing nukes at each other. And it's just like, they're just like constantly like making different regions of the world just hell just to try to screw each other over. I think it's going to be fun. Like just
No,
to see
that'll be
how wild
great.
that gets.
Yeah, no, I'm very much looking forward to it. But I wanted to, obviously we've gone a little bit over what I had anticipated, but we've been having such a lovely talk. It's been really good, and I appreciate your time. Do you have anything you'd like to say in closing for everybody before we let you go?
Probably should have thought of some of this beforehand.
No, you're okay.
You should all have wonderful days and lives. Enjoy Godherja, enjoy modding. If it interests you at all to mod, try it out. It could be a fun hobby, if nothing else. It's a great time. Work on Godherja or work on your own thing. Do not be scared of the possibility of just making a mod. And if you do decide to make it, just release it early and just keep building on it. And come say hi to me and show me the mod you made, and I'll shout it out somewhere, because modders got to stick together and check out the mod co-op, which I made and I'm very proud of. I barely run it nowadays. Everybody else does. Shout out to Uber, but it's a great place. Modders from all over the community gather and learn anything you need. People there are great, and they help me a ton. And they'll help you a ton.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'll definitely remember to link that in the description. Thank you for pointing that out. The co-op is a good resource. I always jump on there every once in a while. Not always, I should say. I jump on there every once in a while to see what people are working on. But unfortunately, I have to be tight-lipped about everything because I don't want to spoil people's shit. But thank you, as always. And we'll go on to the next one now. And for our number 3 interview, we have Jamie Sun from the Lord of the Rings Realms in Exile team. Thank you for joining me today, Jamie.
No problem at all. Pleasure's all mine.
Yeah. So what is your role over at the Lord of the Rings team? Are you you're the main lead, correct?
That's right, the lead dev. So the team lead, I suppose. We have a group of about 5 lead devs, including myself, and then around 10 active, more junior developers.
Okay. And so were you there when the mod was, I guess, formed, or did you come in later?
Not quite. I came in a little bit later. So pretty much as soon as CK3 was released, I started playing about with the mapping tools. My interest at the beginning was really about mapping, and using CK3 as a kind of almost like a playground for building little worlds for myself and things like that. I've always been interested in that kind of, building fantasy worlds, conlanging, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But then, I joined the team. I think it was around October, November 2020, just before the birth of my child, and then I've been there ever since. So it's about 4 years I've been part of the team.
Okay.
But I took over as lead maybe about a year in. It was originally Matt the Leguman who did a lot of the initial map work, things like that.
Okay. So because I was going to ask, so you have a penchant for map making. So is that the main thing that you contribute to the team besides being the lead, obviously?
I wish it was, in a way. I mean, in necessity over the years has kind of just dictated that I needed to do a lot of different things to keep the mod moving.
Mhm.
So although I came in with an interest in doing mapping and pretty much only mapping, um, that evolved into doing scripting events, decisions, whole mechanics, doing a bit of 2D art once, AI tools came online, and that suddenly wasn't as much of a blocker as it was for me before. I think I've done pretty much a bit of everything now after 4 years, and I'd probably consider myself a jack of all trades, but definitely a master of none, except for maybe when it comes to the mapping. That's kind of where my main passion is.
Okay. So is this the first game that you've ever modded, or have you been modding maps previously to this?
No, it's the first time I've modded seriously as a dedicated hobby. I've kind of experimented a bit over the years. I mean, it's quite a few years now. I'm like in my mid-30s, so first thing I probably modded was Civilization 3. So adding a few little um, units in that I like the
Mm-hmm.
idea of, and then into Civ 4 and 5, making some European maps. I had a little European map mod. The one thing that always bugged me about that was that in a Civilization map, Russia was always huge, and you only ever had Russia in there. So I tilted Europe slightly to make it so there was a bit more balanced. But that was really the only foray I'd had in the past. So this was more just something really capture my interest in CK3, and the I'm sure you've heard it from the other people you speak to, but the tools available to you in CK3 and the scripting language that they have is really quite accessible. So it wasn't so much of a barrier. And the one other thing that really kept me coming back to this, which the other projects and dabblings that I'd done in the past didn't have, was the team element. So this is very much a team creative endeavor, whereas everything in the past was just me on my own doing it for my own benefits. And while that has its own, positives, there's less creative differences and things like that. It's a bit more of a lonely endeavor, and I very much enjoy the kind of collaborative working as a team. So that's, I
Yeah.
think, what's kept me around for 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely would. Plus, it seems that and we'll get maybe a little bit more into this as we progress, but it does seem that the team has put a lot of its own unique self into the mod, as well as obviously what Professor Tolkien, already put into his world, his lore. But there seems to be a lot of the team present in the mod too, which I think is a difficult task for making something in a pre-existing IP.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's pretty much the granddaddy of all fantasy genre is
Yeah.
Tolkien's work. So it's a very rich corpus to draw from. But um, one of the decisions that was made quite early on was that we wouldn't just focus in on the northwestern part of Middle Earth. That is where all that canon discussion takes. I mean, a lot of Tolkien's descriptions of anywhere beyond that area was very much here be dragons. It's meant to be vague. It's meant to be a bit mysterious, to add that kind of mystique to the world and to give it that sense of mythology and timelessness. But we wanted to expand beyond that, just because if we were to limit the scope to just within the Northwest Middle Earth, I think it would feel a little tight for a CK3 mod. So we wanted to expand outwards, and a very popular map and extension of the setting, although there are many, is the Middle Earth role-playing game, which was, I think, 80s or 90s, a tabletop RPG where they had an expansion of the map for people to play. I think it was kind of around the middle of the Third Age it was set in. But yes, that forms the basis of our extended map. But MERP can get really odd in certain places, so we very much, take every idea, pass it through our, a litmus test of, does this pass the sniff
Right.
test? If it does, we'll incorporate it. If it doesn't, then we'll do our own thing with it.
So I guess by an extension of that, since you as a team decided that you didn't want to just focus in, has there been any difficulty, or I guess rather pushback, from the community of people who are like obviously very strong? Like, it's Tolkien; he has a very strong fan base. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan myself. I remember seeing the movies in theaters as a kid, and then reading the book after the fact. But I would assume it's difficult. I mean, you're making a mod for one of the largest IPs in the world, realistically speaking. I mean, Amazon just made $1 billion TV show. Say what you will about anything else. Like, it has the broad appeal. Like, is it difficult to take any liberties, or to even make things that would necessarily be like canon, and have people, I don't know, like criticize it for not being good enough? Like, how does the team manage that?
Thankfully, the community, I think, has been very kind with our interpretation of non-canon areas and our focus in those kind of areas too. You'll obviously get people who think that we should be spending more time in the Northwest of Middle Earth where there's more canon material. There's some people who hold the alternative view, and they really just want me to fill the map out as quickly as possible so they can see all of the new areas that is basically new material, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, like I say, in general, they've been quite kind, and we generally follow the philosophy of, as a team, of, does it fit the spirit of Tolkien? Can we weave in these new areas into the existing narrative? And it's not just kind of building on the corpus of Tolkien, but also, we're not the first fan group to kind of extend or to try and enrich the world that he
Mm-hmm.
gave us that was already so enriched. So we also try and build in elements of other fan endeavors, like other mods from like, say, for the Total War games,
Mm-hmm.
the whole I know you did a playthrough of the RR Denaim at one point, which was those kind of black Numenorians on the
Yep.
islands just outside of Umbar. That was an Easter egg for the Total War mod.
I think I remember somebody had mentioned that. I think it might have been the person who put it in, because I've also done a brief one for, I can't remember his name. It's like the Golden Realm and Rune, the Golden
Oh
like
yeah,
board.
who's Magos?
Yes, who's Margoz? He's a great character. And I've honestly, that has been a big thing that I've loved about the mod. Your guys' mod in particular is that I think the quest lines are really well done. Is that like a team endeavor, like, or is it an individual who's doing those?
It tends to be a bit of both. So it'll tend to be one person who is really inspired to take on a particular line of content, whether it be decision trees, event trees, even mechanics. They'll tend to really focus on that. But then we never really let any one person just do their own thing.
Mhm.
We always discuss ideas as a group, make sure we all at least broadly agree. If there is disagreement, we'll talk it through. If we need to, we'll have a vote. So it's all very democratic and collaborative as a process. Um, so obviously we have more leeway in non-canon areas. We can do our things more often. The kind of tests is more, is this in the spirit of Tolkien? Does this fit in with the general lore? There's obviously a lot more scrutiny when we are developing things within, Gondor, Mordor,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff that will pass even more. And we constantly revisit stuff as well and look at what we've done in the past and say, we could do that better. So one thing I've just finished off this week is complete kind of terrain repaint of Rohan and Gondor because I didn't quite like the way it looked. So now hopefully we've been cross-referencing with maps that Tolkien's done himself. We've been redrawing rivers. We've been smashing down hills, raising mountains, just to get it as close as possible to, what Tolkien created.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, that makes total sense. Which, extending off of this questline idea, I'm sure you might know what I'm going to ask because Landless has just come out, and I know you guys are probably getting asked this a million times. And I want to ask it from a different angle. Do you think it's feasible in a sandbox like Crusader Kings 3 to actually implement the Fellowship, or do you think you're going to have to do like an altered version of that?
It's difficult because the Fellowship in the end will feel like one of the crown jewels of the mod. It will be a really important and unique thing to our mod, right? It'll be one of the reasons why people come and play it and what they expect. And we've seen that over the last 4 years. One of the most common questions is, where's the One Ring? Is there a ring quest? That kind of thing. So we have to do it, and
Right.
really we have to do it well. Um, over the last 4 years, we've had the excuse of we want to wait. We don't feel like the game is in a position where we could properly do it justice. But now, as you say, with landless play, it's suddenly becoming a lot more possible for us, and we've started to have discussions internally around what that might look like. Now, there were some team members who are really keen to just get going on it because they suddenly have the tools, but I kind of caution and say, let's do some quest type content, some landless content for some smaller,
Mhm.
minor areas, so we can get a feel for, we can understand exactly all the tools we have to work with, the limitations, the fun things that we can do with it. Then once we've had that little play, we can properly dedicate down to the ring quest, because in the end we want to use the landless, we want to have it be a bit of a branching narrative, so not only just to follow the kind of canon path of the fellowship, but also to have branching narratives. So what if they choose not to go through Moria, say, or what
Mhm.
if they choose to go through the Gap of Rohan, and then, well, as soon as you start to do that, even that's just a branching off the core storyline. But then you also need to consider, what state of them is the map in at that time. So if they decide to go through the Gap of Rohan, is Isengard good? Is Isengard evil? What impacts does that have on the narrative? So you can see how it's quite a daunting
Oh yeah,
idea
absolutely.
if you commit yourself to the idea that you really have to do a good job of this. So that's certainly our ambition, and we're looking to explore it. I mean, some of the key at the moment, I'm really focusing on the themes of it, like what should it feel like,
Mhm.
um, and I want it to be more than just a one-way endeavor. So it shouldn't just be the Fellowship and their journey, and do they get to Mordor in time? And if so, they destroy the One Ring and Sauron falls and things like that.
Mhm.
Sauron needs his side to this argument. The forces of evil need their side to the story to be able to counterbalance that. So, we've got to, just as important to think about what does the Fellowship quest look like. The other side of the coin is equally important, of how do you create engaging gameplay for Mordor to try and counter their efforts.
Right, like with the Nazgul or something, like how do you have them chasing you down, or
Yeah,
Is it
exactly.
is
So
it
we
just
could
like a
have the
random event?
Nazgul as landless characters themselves who have quests in and around where the Fellowship are to try and find them. And based on the actions that the Fellowship take, they can almost have increased secrecy or lower secrecy and things like that to influence how likely they are to be found.
Mm,
These are all just kind of ideas at the moment, but this is kind of where you need to have that playground at the very start just to kind of get those ideas out there. But we
yeah.
need to have this kind of tug of war between the two sides to properly model an interesting ring quest, I think.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, and everybody I'm sure is expecting, but I'm going to obviously be playing the evil side because I'm a terrible person and I only ever play evil characters for some reason on this channel. Um, yeah, because I was thinking about that when you started talking about it. I was like, I guess you could do the Nazgul maybe because if the Fellowship branches, that might be difficult to tackle from the opposite standpoint. So
Mm,
I guess as like I know nothing about modding, so to take my advice with a grain of salt, I would recommend maybe having them follow a set route, like their canon route,
mhm.
as if you're playing as the Nazgul, and then just like change the the chances of stuff. Like maybe you can kill somebody or something. But like obviously that's here nor there. It's just like something I thought of, or like I think like a good introduction to landless. Like what I imagined in my head would be like logical landless characters like roving goblin bands. Like that would be a
Mhm.
huge one because that's very much in canon, very much in lore. And you guys have already made fun quests for goblins. I've done stuff with them and they're they're
Yep,
they're a blast. So it would be like something like that would work, or like Rune, very much mercenary focused people. You could do something with them, all kinds of stuff.
definitely. And I mean, also, just thinking about some very unique stuff, like you start to think about how it interacts with the people of the world. So, elves, a lot of the kind of standard quests don't really make sense for them. You're not going to get vagabond elves who are going around and kind of heisting
No.
the vaults of local rulers and things like that. So, we're starting to build quests for them, like healing quests and things like that. But
Mm.
equally, another important character type that, okay, they're not very numerous, but there's a lot of interesting people wanting to play them is the Astari. So we're
Mm-hmm.
already kind of talking around what do Astari contracts look like, because they're immortal. They're not really interested in this kind of what a standard landless character might be interested in. They're not leading mercenary bands. They're not going on heists and things like that.
Yeah.
They're really trying to influence and advise and shape the world. So we're kind of having internal discussions around what should that look like? What does this starry landless gameplay look like? Because of course we've got Gandalf, who is the quintessential kind of
Right. Of
landless
course.
starry. At times, and certainly in earlier bookmarks when we release them, Saruman will be. Radagast just kind of does his own things, and then obviously we've got the two blue wizards. When we add more in the east, they will start to rear their heads and have their own part to play in those areas when we add them.
So that is interesting. I didn't know, and this was something I wasn't even going to ask. But so there are plans to make other bookmarks in the future.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We've got a lot penned in, and we've announced publicly that we're working on our first, second, sorry, our first major bookmark, which isn't the 3000 third age. So that's going to be an Angmar start date. So focusing on the kind of conflict between Angmar, the Witch King's realm, and the provinces around
Yeah.
Arnor.
I feel like that
So
would have a lot of flexibility too, because it's obviously you have like a decent amount of lore for it, but it's more I guess historical. It's not as set in stone, so you can be a little more flexible with what you
yeah,
do.
exactly. And other ones we've talked about doing in the past, but and are on the radar, but we haven't properly started any proper work on them is a Last Alliance start date, so end of second age.
Yeah.
Um, but those are kind of major. We're thinking about it in terms of major and minor bookmarks. So major will be similar to what we have right now, where there's a lot of focus on narrative events, decisions, event chains, things like that, like a lot of directed play and narrative. And we expect those will take a fair while to properly do justice. But then
Mm.
there's minor bookmarks, which are a bit more sandboxy. So, where we just have the state of the world in broadly where we want it to be. And we just say to the player, look, this is here to give you something different. There's not as much narrative there, but it's a different state of Middle Earth. You can play at different points in its history.
Hmm.
So we want to add those as well. But again, while there's not much um, decision work to do that and event work on those, we have to do what does all of the world look like at that point? So there's a lot of history work to do for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And plus, I think that moving into other bookmarks will give people, I guess, less stress for me. One of my biggest, not problems, because this is the same in every Lord of the Rings mod. Like the Warband mod had the same thing. If you've ever played it, it was great. But there's always that impetus that you have to get rid of Sauron before you can do anything else, or like that's the only goal, and it feels like you're limited if you want to, maybe, because you just had a huge expansion, or I believe it's getting added soon, the beta, the new area further south.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's it's like, oh, it's really cool to be able to play these areas, but there's this existential doomsday threat to the north of you that about, and it's like, how, like, do you play ignorant to that? So I think, yeah, I am definitely
And
I
we hear that a lot, is kind of from the choice of the 3000 Third Age, about 20 years before the events came to a head in the is followed in the Lord of the Rings.
Mhm.
Obviously, there is that ticking time bomb of this needs to get resolved. It's all coming to a head. I mean, part of the reason for wanting to go south was to mitigate that, because obviously when the map was very much constrained around Gondor and Rohan and Mordor and near Harad, everything was just in this thunderdome
Mhm.
of yeah, exactly, of Sauron and Aragorn. But as you play down further in the south, you're obviously a bit more um, further removed. You can kind of just do your own thing down in the south for 50 years, look up and say, oh hell, what's happening up in the north, and it doesn't touch you all that much. So
Yeah.
that was part of the rationale for going down south at the time.
No, that's I think that's smart. And it's
But yeah,
no.
earlier start dates will definitely have Sauron in a bit more of a chill mode. He's kind of in hibernation in certain times of the
He's taking a nap. So
yeah.
so you came onto the team obviously in like 2020. Has Lord of the Rings been something that you've been interested in a long time? Like, did you just jump at the opportunity because you wanted to work on any mod, or was it just the subject matter that drew you in?
Well, like I say, I initially just opened the map editor and started drawing a random world of my own, just like almost like Godherja, thinking about maybe I could create a custom fantasy setting. But I wouldn't say I'm a Lord of the Rings super fan. There are definitely people I rely on the team for lore far more than myself, who
Mhm.
are far more knowledgeable of that. And I would probably say, compared to the rest of the team, my Lord of the Rings knowledge is probably embarrassingly small. But I was in my mid 30s. I was a teenager when the Lord of the Rings movies came out, and they kind of really captured my imagination. So it's very nostalgic part of my childhood or adolescence,
Right.
to see Peter Jackson's interpretations of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
Um,
I was around the same age. We're pretty similar in age, which is a unique perspective, I guess, in the modding community or in the CK3 community, because everybody tends to be a little bit surprisingly younger than you would think.
they do, yeah. And honestly, just briefly going back to kind of the team, that's one of the things I find quite rewarding about working with the teams. They tend to be on the younger side. You got guys on a lot of the guys on the modding team are going through university or college.
Hmm.
Um, they're doing this in their free time, um, or they've kind of moved on from college since, and they're kind of starting their adult lives and things, and they're still squeezing this on the side. So you kind of go on a bit of a journey with them, but they're also picking up kind of like new skills, like coding, and it's obviously uses its own internal coding language, but the scripting language, but the skills that they're learning is stuff that they can take into other areas of their lives. Not
Hmm.
just that, but kind of working with teams and things like that, as part of a team. It's all really valuable um character building and kind of growing as a person. And without wanting to sound like the old man of the group, but especially you don't like to think of yourself as an old man in the mid
No,
30s, but you do feel like it sometimes.
sometimes.
um it's just really rewarding to see people grow. Even just over the space of 4 years, like learning new skills, growing as a person, and just in the way they interact with the team, it's really, really rewarding to see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So how do you keep that sort of team, with all these? I'm assuming, especially if they do tend to run younger, inevitably people will leave when they have less
Mm.
free time. How do you organize them and to keep things going at a? Because you guys, I feel like, have been fairly consistent with your updates, at least semi regularly, as far as I've noticed. So how are you keeping that going? How are you keeping that organized?
So there's a few things really. So one is just the philosophy I try to have as team lead, just to the work, and one is, and the overriding theme of that is, this isn't a job. It's not 9 to 5. You don't get paid. This is a hobby. The golden rule is, if you're not enjoying it or you feel like you need a break, there's no obligation to carry on. You can take those breaks. Sometimes inspiration fails you, or you get in a rut, or college work is too much. Just, we're fully supportive, and we never set deadlines until like 2 or 3 weeks before release, because we don't want there to be that kind of pressure. It is a
Hmm.
hobby and we do it for pleasure. So there is that. There's also just the way in which we choose to release our content. So total conversion mods, there is a lot of work behind it. We change pretty much all of the files in vanilla. Different total conversions take different approaches. Some have what I kind of call the wide but shallow approach, which is where you cover the whole map, but you inevitably can't go as deep as in kind of content and flavor
Hmm.
as you might have done if you'd focused on a small area. We've done it in kind of the deeper but smaller chunks. We'll release region by region. So that in itself gives you it makes the work feel a bit more bite-sized, a bit more achievable. You've got kind of some short-term goals where you can say, it's a lot easier to know what success looks like on one given release, because you can say, we've got some good decisions, good content, we've got all these cultures, faiths, men at arms, we've got all the history sorted for an area. It's a lot easier to see kind of the light at the end of any one tunnel. So I
Hmm.
think that as well helps for engagement, and it also helps people feel like they can check out, like, I've done this slice of work. I need life to take a bit more of a priority now, so I'm just going to chill until maybe the next slice of work that inspires me. So I think that helps. But then the kind of third and final thing that you can't underestimate is, we do just have a core group of developers that are small in number
Hmm.
but large in output, that they dedicate a lot of their time to kind of make this a reality, and you can't underestimate that. And I'm obviously really grateful for the time that they choose to invest, not just to spend creatively with me and the rest of the team to work together on this, but also obviously this is in a way kind of our gift to the wider community and to Tolkien fans everywhere, to build this that we can all enjoy together.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's very well said, very well put. Um, so as a general, I guess, because you're somebody who just got into modding because of Crusader Kings 3, I'm making this series in hope that people who are interested in modding, in particular, I'm not a modder, I've not been interested, but I like people who do these things, obviously. And so I like, what is your advice to somebody who wants to get into this like hobby? Like maybe they've never done it before and they're worried that it's too difficult. You sort of came in having never really done it before, except for like Civ, as you said, with map editing. So what would you tell somebody like that? Especially some of these people listening might be going into university, it might be late teens or just beyond it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'll caveat by saying that I'm obviously not going to give the perfect answer or anything like
No,
that,
it's
but from
okay.
my own experience, I think number one is, it really helps to have something that really inspires you, or that you really want to change about the game. That doesn't need to be like creating your own fantasy setting or anything like that. It could just be, you really wish a certain mechanic was in there and you can work within vanilla, and the vanilla world and things like that, and just kind of find something that really interests you. So you need to be interested in it to kind of, because there are tough parts, especially when you're first learning. So you need to be committed to the idea, at least, of what you're trying to
Hmm.
achieve.
Hmm.
The second thing is, I'd say, look for like-minded individuals. So whether that be people who are also looking to achieve the same thing, there's the modding co-op. You can go there and see if any other people are looking to do something similar. Obviously, if you're interested in Lord of the Rings, join our Discord and talk to us about your ideas, what you want to do. AGOT, Elder Kings, anything else, they'd say the same. Try and find other people you can work with, because it's always easier to work as a group. And then the other third final piece of advice I give is, just don't go too hard, too fast, and try and kind of focus your efforts in a particular area at once. So,
Hmm.
you know, think of it as building blocks. You might set out and say, I really want to learn all the scripting language for CK3, and I want to build these mechanics around it. Maybe I want to add a whole trade system to vanilla, that kind of thing, and something really ambitious that everyone will enjoy. Don't start with that. For the love of God, especially if you're coming in cold, even if you have some coding knowledge, because there is weird oddities to kind of get your head around. Start small. Think about just doing some basic building blocks. Some of the most easiest things you can do in scripting wise is events and decisions. They're kind of relatively bite-sized. There's loads of examples in the vanilla code that you can look at to get inspiration from. Even if you're, for your first event, you're copying 80% of it just to kind of, and then tweaking things to be how you like it. Just doing that for a few times to get your head around the basics and start to understand how it all fits together can be really helpful, and kind of build in building blocks from there. Do something different. Maybe this time, instead of one random event, you're going to build an event chain, where they come together. Maybe you're going to tie it to a decision next, where the decision fires an event chain. Maybe you're going to make it branch next time. And then, maybe it all just kind of evolves from there. Maybe I want to gift some men-at-arms as a result of this content. Well, suddenly now you're learning, a little bit extra, and I need to learn about men-at-arms and how I code those in. And it all just builds from there. So I'd say start small, keep your focus tight, and from that you'll just naturally learn new things. That would be my kind of 3 pieces of advice.
No, those were great. You said you wouldn't give a good answer, and you elaborated quite well, I would say.
Well, there'll be other people who say just go for it and get your feet wet and just start that trade system. Go for it, capture that enthusiasm. But for me, at least, I've always valued that kind of more slow, bite-sized approach to learning things.
Right, like take your time. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So this is such a terrible segue, but I want to know, and I have it written on my notes, because you make a mod for Middle Earth. If you could live anywhere in Middle Earth, where would you live?
Oh, the Shire for sure.
Oh.
It's nice. It's cozy. It's based on my homeland of England. Just kind of everyone's eating well, enjoying things, and they're not letting the big wide world, bother them too much. But I'd probably caveat that by saying I'd like to be a bit of a traveling hobbit. I have my home to come back to, but there's still a wondrous world out there to explore and to see. So, that's probably what I would pick.
The Shire has always been an interesting one because I too love the aesthetic of it. I'm obviously not English or British in any way, as you can hear by my voice, but I also am somebody who travels a lot, and I've been all over the world, and it's sort of that the antithesis of being a hobbit, unless you're Bilbo, and everybody looks at him like he's a weirdo. So I feel like for me, I'd probably want to be from like Gondor or something, because Gondor is such a wide area. I feel like you only ever focus on Minas Tirith, but there's such unique places within the Gondorian, I guess, empire, you could call it. So somebody like that, maybe from one of the Swan place. Can't remember. Dol Amroth, maybe.
Dol Amroth. Yeah.
Dol
Nice
Amroth.
coastal, lovely.
Yeah.
And of course, Gondor's pretty much kind of like crossroads of the world. It's a bit like our Constantinople, right? You've kind of got this melting pot of, okay, there's the big shadowy mountain place, across across the river that has this existential threat looming over it. But I assume you wouldn't want to be 3000 Third Age. You're kind of in a more peaceful time when it was nice.
yeah, I definitely wouldn't want to be in precedented times. I feel like I do that enough in real life. I'd like to not have that happen.
You're not sitting in Osgiliath like in 2009.
No, I don't have ambitions of going down with the ship. It's maybe when I was younger. I'm good now. I'd rather just chill, maybe cut down a tree or something. I don't know, ride a horse. Yeah. Do something relaxing. So I guess before we leave you, what are the mods' plans? For now that the DLCs are out. I mean, we're recording this the day before the last DLC drops for Chapter 3. Presumably, there won't be any more DLC for at least like a couple months. So you'll have some time to not worry as much about patches, because Roads to Power was patching like every other day, it felt like. So what are the mods' plans? What is the team's plan?
So we've kind of. A lot of the focus over the first 3 years of the mod's development has been around getting that kind of northwestern part of Middle Earth in, and now we're there. So now we're kind of focusing on 3 main work streams really as we go forward. So one will be around adding new regions to the map. So that's going to be very much in the same approach that we've been doing it so far, though maybe slightly smaller chunks this time. Certainly not going to add all of Harad like we did that one time. We've learned from that. It was a bit
Oh my god.
biting off a bit more than we can chew.
Yeah.
So, most recently in the open beta we have right now, that's Tani Hazard and other areas of the southwest of Middle Earth. That was kind of the region that we're adding, but then we'll move on to the next regions and we'll just keep knocking that off. My personal ambition is I'm not leaving or put downing tools until I've mapped all of the Middle Earth map that we have on kind of our paper map. So that will be tackled one slice at a time. We haven't revealed where we're going next, but there's already speculation. I mean, I generally don't like ugly, like weird things jutting off on the map, so people can probably guess reasonably where I might be thinking about going next.
Right.
But part of it as well is that we just don't know what's coming up with next year's DLC.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they give us a bit of heads up, right? They tell us what's coming for the year,
Yeah.
so we're kind of in a bit of a wait and see mode. If they do stuff on trade, there's plenty of areas around, say, the Bay of Ormal where we could do some interesting trade based stuff, or in
Right.
other areas. If they do, I know a lot of people speculate around things like nomads and the
I
likes.
feel like
Maybe
that's a
they'll
given.
come in.
Yeah.
If and when that drops, those kind of central plains and steppes, we will likely try and tackle those at the same time. So we'll see around map expansions, but we'll bite off those area by area until we fill out the rest of the map. So that's one work stream. The other work stream will be around earlier bookmarks, which we alluded to earlier. So Angmar's one we're working on at the moment. Inevitably, when you're doing work on earlier bookmarks, you also kind of help out nearby bookmarks because you're doing a lot of title history in a similar kind of time period. So but our main focus is on Angmar. And then the third and final work stream, as you alluded to earlier, will be people thinking about their inquest and what that looks like. So it's a bit broader now than it was in the first 3 years of development, where we were really all focused on let's just get the elves in, let's just get the dwarves in, let's push south. Now the dev team have a bit more choice. Some people just aren't really interested in these non-canon areas, and they'd rather spend their time adding flavor to the stuff that Tolkien spent his time on, and that's perfectly okay. And hopefully these 3 different prongs of attack, as we were, getting more content into the mod gives the team that variety to be able to do the stuff they enjoy. So that's the things to look forward to.
Yeah, no, those sound obviously a lot to tackle, a lot to consider. So this is something that I was wondering, because I've asked everybody, is there because some teams do this, I don't know if you guys do, is there a Patreon that people can donate to help like with modeling, with commissions or anything? Does the Lord of the Rings mod have that?
No, we don't have any Patreon, anything that. We're not interested in getting anything monetary from it. It's purely a passion project for fans of Tolkien and Middle Earth. And kind of the best thing we can get out of it is community engagement, people enjoying it, posting images, videos, whatever it might be of their playthroughs, and just seeing kind of what crazy stuff they get up to in the kind of world that we create. Because it's the same with any Paradox game. You can put all the pieces in a nice logical order to begin with before you start pressing play. But as soon as you press that play button, anything can happen. So it's always really interesting and rewarding to see just what people do with what you make.
Oh, absolutely. I can only imagine but you can do just all kinds of crazy stuff. And I've been, like I said, I've been impressed with what you guys have done so far, because I remember first playing the mod maybe, like 2, maybe 3 years ago, and it just had basically Rohan, Gondor, and Sauron from what I remember, and I think he still looked different. I think he didn't have his armor yet, and now we have this huge world. There's elves, there's dwarves, which I'm so grateful, because I love the dwarves. My favorite race in Middle Earth. They're so great, and I love that there's a wide variety of them. And it's been wonderful to see, and it's also been wonderful to talk to you. I appreciate your insight. I'm sure that the listeners do as well. And do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to share before we let you go?
not in particular. Just for anyone who has played our mod over the years, thank you. Keep coming back to it. We're adding stuff all the time, and hopefully you'll continue to enjoy it as we add more and more areas and develop things like the Fellowship Ring Quest over time. For those that haven't checked it out, give it a go. There's lots of interesting content, even if you don't really know much about Lord of the Rings. A lot of it is narrative driven, so you can pick one of the larger realms. You'll have decisions and things like that you can start to explore. And a lot of what we do is around trying to showcase a lot of what Tolkien's work is. So even just to take one example, we have an activity which is literally explore the histories, where you can get your character can go into the archives and learn things about the histories of Middle Earth. And you too can learn alongside that, as well as just get some bonuses to your character, like free stat points, things like that. So yeah, I think there's something for everyone. And I guess one final closing thing. Obviously, we said that we don't seek any monetary reward or anything like that. It is purely a passion project, but engaging on the Discord. And if you do have any ambitions around picking up modding and you think you might be interested in working for the team, just reach out. Even if you have little to no experience, that's exactly where I started. And I'm doing things now 4 years later that I didn't even dream I would be able to do, you know back in 2020. So we'll happily take you on board the journey. All we ask for is that enthusiasm and the ability to kind of work collaboratively as a team.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Jamie. And at our fourth interview here, we have East Pointed, the lead and creator of the Alpha Destiny mod. Am I correct in saying that you're the creator?
That is correct. What's going on, everybody?
Yeah, welcome. How are you this afternoon?
I'm super excited. I'm honored that you chose me to be the interview 20 minutes after the release of the new DLC.
Oh, I know.
You're probably excited to get in there, but you prioritize this, and I appreciate it.
I will say I did have access to the DLC for like a week and a half, 2 weeks. So I already have a video out for it. But I definitely take precedent. I think mod creators are more important than DLC. I'm just going to say it right now. That's a Soul Tomato quote. You can quote me on that.
Completely agree.
Yeah. Anyway, this is something that I want to know so bad, because you have a Samwise Gamgee profile picture. Why did you pick elves as your topic of your mod and not something like hobbits or anything else?
Well, there's Samwise is connected to elves in a way, but obviously I'm a Lord of the Rings fan.
Mm-hmm.
But the inspiration for the mod came from Pantheon of the Gods. I don't know if you've ever played that mod before. It's one of the classics. It was like one of the first big mods that came out with CK3.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about becoming a god in general, but they also included like playable elves on the map, and I just thought that was the most fun, the coolest thing. And with a lot of big mods, eventually it just kind of the creator got busy with life and he couldn't support it anymore. And so I suddenly couldn't play with the elves anymore. So I'm like, I'm a programmer in my real life. And so I'm like, I have the skills to probably fix this. And then once I started telling people I was at least adding elves into the game again, it kind of snowballed and people got excited. And that's what led to the mod.
Yeah, the mod is definitely, it has continually picked up progress as I've been checking in and on it over the last few months. So you're a programmer. So have you done any modding before this, or is this like the first mod you've made purely because you were like, there's a need, I'm going to fill it because I want this?
Yeah, you nailed it. It's first mod. I mean, that's kind of what makes it fun. Like my normal work is like web development, and that I kind of burned out on that for one. And this is like programming that's fun. Like the things I add, I enjoy adding them. It's super addicting to like see people play with the thing you make and give feedback, where normal job you don't get that. So
that's true. Also, so you're a unique perspective here. I think you're the only person maybe who's like had a technical job that we've had so far anyway. So how do you, because a few people have talked about how the Paradox code is like fun to use. Have you had that experience as well, like with making the mod?
Yeah, I would just say comparatively, it's streamlined, simplified. Like it's there's definitely a lot more complicated coding languages out there. Like especially even just web development, there's a million different frameworks. So like it's nice it's very beginner friendly, is how I'll put it. Like anyone can get into it, and it's very appealing in that way.
So you're obviously the creator. You started this. How many people do you have on the team now?
So I mean, there's still really not an official team. It's really just me, but that doesn't mean I don't get help. Like I definitely have volunteers who have stepped up and done work for the mod. One of them I'll call out is Rob Mart from the Warcraft mod. He's kind of made some patches, and I did make the project open source so people can make pull requests on GitHub and contribute that way. And I've had people from proofreaders to translators to writers. It's almost, it's not a problem, but it's like it is a little bit of an issue where it almost wants to pull me out too thin. Where I want to, like, everyone's excited, they want to help with the mod, and I only have so much bandwidth, and it can be kind of off-putting. Like, dude, that's a great idea. I'd love to work with you on that, but it might be 3 months before I even have any time to even begin to work on that. So it's actually been kind of a challenge, like saying, hey, the mod's good. You can start trusting other people with features and stuff. But I think I'm slowly getting there. I've even like started making Discord channels where I'm starting to like lend out features to people.
Do you worry that with this like sort of polling thing that there's just going to be too many people, like too many conflicting ideas going into the mod? Are you directly overseeing what finally goes in the mod, or are you just sort of like letting them do it if it's polled well?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do final sign off on everything, and even yeah, and it is a concern. It's like I don't want to give. I don't know if it's just me, but or if it's a selfish thing, but creative control is like hard to let your baby go and let somebody else play in your sandbox. You know, it's
No, absolutely.
so there's definitely some individuals I've been like building trust with, and they're good, and I'm opening up more and more. I'm growing as a person, and I think eventually, long term, because this is a super addicting, fun hobby, but it is a huge time sink. So there's no way I could continue it like this forever, and I am going to have to like unwind and trust other people to work on it.
So you imagine that you're just going to open up into a team format rather than just sort of like a sword for hire format, we'll call it, where you're just sort of like people who are capable that you trust can add to the mod. Eventually you'll have like a proper team. And this is a unique perspective as well, because you're the only, arguably, like, this is a sub mod, right? Essentially it's not a total conversion mod because it's not changing the map too much. I mean, I think you guys have done some map work, right?
Some people have made like sub mods with the Atlantis mod and stuff, and I've changed a few like titles around and stuff. But it's still the Earth map. And yeah, that was a big, when I started on this journey, like, hey, I need to set a reasonable scope. There's no way I can do a total conversion mod. Don't even try. I mean, even the work that I did take on is probably too big, and I should have reduced the scope a bit. But
so is that something that you would recommend to people looking to do something similar? Because I think a good place to start. Somebody else had mentioned prior to this. I'm not remembering who specifically, but they said when starting with a mod, it's better to start small. Would you recommend starting with like a sub mod with just base CK3 rather than jumping into something, even with if it was for like Realms in Exile or AGOT, say if it was a sub mod for that? Do you just recommend starting with vanilla in your experience?
Yeah, and it's I've talked about this before. It's like I would recommend making an MVP, like a minimum viable product. If you want to, you can have the dream of a total conversion mod, but yeah, start with, hey, what kind of traits would I want in that mod? See if you can do that. Oh, cool. What kind of events would I want in that mod? Build those out, and like keep adding layers to the onion till you get to what you want. Like focus on things that are like deliverable. Because if you just go for the huge map, the huge thing first, you're probably going to run out of motivation halfway through, and you'll never end up actually delivering the thing. So yeah, start small and onion out.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. So the last time I played this, and I have played it for people who are curious, a couple times, but the first time I played it, it was still kind of early. I think you had some story elements to it. What is the roadmap for the story in your opinion? Like, do you have a sort of an open-ended goal? Because there seemed to be a lot of internal lore, which I was going to ask you, like where you've gotten the inspiration from for that as well. But do you have like this is what I want it to look like from start to finish, or is it just sort of like where we'll see where it goes?
Yeah, and just as self promotion, if people want to go check out the roadmap, it's on the Discord. But The general idea is I want it to be an elf sandbox. You know, it's inspired by Lord of the Rings, but it's also like inspired by Dune, Wheel of Time, all these other like all the fantasy and sci-fi series I've ever read. You'll find Easter eggs in there, and the idea is you're a human lord, and someone comes to you, an archaeologist, that they've found ancient elven ruins, and you go there and you find a magic item, you're turned into an elf, and you're the new elf king. And so now you need to decide what kind of elf people you want to have. Do you want to be the mean, evil, dark elves, or do you want to be the nice, get along with the human elves? Like the choice is yours, and you continue to explore these ancient ruins, and you unlock new traditions for your culture. And over time, you kind of become, at the moment, a little overpowered, to be honest, but that'll change with time. But you become like this high and mighty elven people. And the roadmap is like you get a quest. There's an elf religion that's been in hiding, and they come to you and they say, "Hey, you need to restore this magic portal from which elves came to Earth many years ago." And that's all of that is like Act 1.
Hmm.
There are plans for like an Act 2 and an Act 3 as you open the portal, and now enemy elves from other worlds start coming through. That's kind of the roadmap plan for it all.
Mm. Yeah, and I've played to the end of the first act, so it doesn't sound like it's gotten added to, at least since then, because I like built the portal, and then I think I remember there's a pop up that says you've reached the end of the act content, which I really enjoyed. I think it's fun. It's kind of reminiscent of like classic RPGs, like 90s, like an RPG where you would you play, or like an Ultima, like sort of a Portal RPG where you're now the elf king, and you have to decide the fate of these people. I really enjoy it. Do you have? How are you keeping the lore for this internalized? Everybody does this differently. Like Godherja, for example, they don't organize it too much. They just sort of like they have it in their heads, which is impressive. But how do you do it?
So I do have a channel called Lore Crafting in my server. It's really for people to put like recommendations they'd like to see. Um, as far as like recorded lore, it's I'll say there's not a lot of documents. We've started a wiki, but um, with volunteer time, it hasn't like flourished yet. But the plan is to have a full wiki with all the different things you can unlock, all the different places you can go, and all the features, and even the lore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you do get lore dumps in the mod. Like they do tell you, hey, this is what happened to the elves, or you need to do this or that. And yeah, I think maybe a long-term full document would be something nice to have.
Yeah, that'd be cool. So as a sub mod and as somebody who's like, I mean, this is mostly a solo project. Like, obviously, you have collaborators, but how do you feel? Because we were just talking about this a couple days ago. Like, you're on I believe, the second page of the workshop and most popular mods. Like, how do you feel about that going toe to toe with like, the Lord of the Rings mod or Game of Thrones or like Elder Kings 2? Like, how does that give you like the hunger? Are you motivated to continue because you've climbed so far?
Yeah, I do think about how to defeat my enemies every other day. I will pull them down one day. No, I mean I do have goals. I have dreams. We will be the number one mod one day, but I'm like greatly honored by some of those mods. Like some of them have like through the mod workshop and stuff offered me help. Like I think POD Prince of Darkness, I've used their code base to figure out how to like change
Mm-hmm.
skins of stuff to make stone statues and whatnot, and they've been very helpful in that way. Um, but yeah, I do have dreams. I think that once the mod is fully fleshed out, that we will be on page 1. We will be top 10. It was nice. We did get a shout out from Paradox. They called it
Yep.
out on Twitter when I released the mod. They put it on the game launcher for a week, and that
Yep.
was so exciting, so fun. Like it just feels really satisfying. And when I made this mod, like the scope of it really was just like, hey, I'm going to add an elf trait to the game.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kept growing as people kept liking it and the success grew. So like I was initially expecting, maybe 100 subscribers. So the fact that it became a really popular mod, like I'm beyond floored. Like
Yeah.
it's such a good feeling.
Oh, absolutely. Have you been able to collaborate with any other mods? Because you said like our Princes of Darkness obviously like lent you some of their code. so that they could assist you, or you could be assisted in adding the statues as you just said. But have you done any elf work like for mods that already have elves, or even Princess of Darkness has like elf-ish races with their fae? Have you done any assistance with that? Do you do any modeling, or is it mostly just coding?
So no, I haven't worked with any other mods. At this point, my skills have kind of grown. Like I do lean into the AI art a bit.
Mhm.
I'm not an artist by trade, so I know that's still a hot topic for people, and I get it. I do really, I totally understand. But I would say I can do everything except 3D modeling. Like that's still the last frontier, but that is something I do plan on actually trying. I'm gonna like, I think the elves do need custom clothes and custom stuff like that, but that's the kind of like cherry on top feature I'll plan on learning like once I have the scaffolding all built out. And that's like you mentioned like how Act 1, like that's all that's in the mod, and that's still the case because like I'm still building wide, still trying to like build out all that scaffolding.
No, that makes total sense, honestly. Yeah. So with the need for, or eventual need for modeling, have you ever considered opening up to like a Patreon or like donations so that you could commission people, or how do you feel about that practice in general?
I do have a Ko-fi, to like coffee or whatever they call them, Ko-fi.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not like, it's just a like, hey, do you want to give me money? It's not a, hey, tit for tat, like you give me this, I'll give you that yet. I haven't made like pledges. I mean, people do get, I guess, a Discord role, and they get behind the scenes access to like development channels and get to see and help and suggest stuff. But I do see long term maybe something like that. Maybe commissions. I just don't know if I'm there yet.
So this is a question I've been asking a few people. So I think you kind of already answered it, but do you have like a loyalty to Crusader Kings? Was there a reason you didn't make this mod for another game, or is it just that you were interested in Crusader Kings 3?
I have a few games that are like my 1,000-hour games, the ones that you just put all your time into. I love RimWorld.
Oh, so good.
If it wasn't Crusader Kings, I would have made a RimWorld mod, but I guess just at the time it was the number one game, Crusader Kings. It probably still is. And it just felt like I had more ideas ready to go. Like I could make Elf Destiny in RimWorld. You can make anything in RimWorld. But it felt more right. It felt more like, no, this is what you should be doing. And yeah, I do love Crusader Kings. Although one of the curses of modding is I play a fraction of the amount of like actual playthroughs as I used to. Like I spend so much more time actually modding than getting a chance to play. Like the new the last like 3 DLCs, I've only put a few hours in of actual playtime. I'm more just building features for them, which I still enjoy more than playing. So it's not like I'm losing anything, but it's a little sad,
No, and that's it's interesting that you brought that up, because I think that's been brought up twice now in these interviews, and it's also something that I've mentioned for people who are interested in maybe making videos. You definitely spend more time recording things and not necessarily gameplay, at least the way I make videos. So I probably play about half as much as I've actually quote played, just because you're thinking about other things or you're messing with mods or whatever. And I know it had to be the same for modders. So it is curious, or interesting rather, that you say that.
And it's kind of a catch up, because like people will be like, hey, have you thought about adding a new feature for I don't know, secret religions? And I'm
yeah,
I had no idea there were secret religions in the game. I gotta go look for that. It's funny.
No, it's interesting too, because I feel like Elf Destiny would benefit, and this is a feature that I want them to add back from CK2, but I would love like societies. I feel like elf societies would be something that could be like occupations, could be something really interesting, or like guilds. Like if eventually, obviously that's not in the game, so we can only speculate, but it'd be cool. Plus I don't know anything. I promise.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I promise.
Sure.
With the potential though for nomads, you have an interesting possibility of like being able to have migrating elves, which I think would play it really well into like a lost elf race. So I would say the future's looking quite bright for the Elf Destiny mod as far as that goes.
Oh yeah, great synergy.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say are the challenges? Because you're like a web designer, you probably have like, I don't know if you still do that full time, but I would assume you like work. And again, as like a mostly solo dev, how do you balance your real life with this hobby, this modding?
So the answer is I really just don't balance it. So like I'm not about a year ago, I actually like took a buyout from work and they're like, "Hey, we need to downsize. We'll give you 4 months pay if you if it, well they said this to the whole company, anyone who wants to volunteer." And I was just like really burned out with work. So I'm like, "Yeah, I'll take the 4 months and I'll maybe take some time for myself and maybe work on my hobbies." And maybe it's just this is so much fun and addicting that I have not. I'm one of those statistics you hear about the men dropping out of the workforce. I have been just like unmotivated to get back in for about a year now,
Mhm.
but I have this has taken up a lot of my time and I've absolutely loved it. Like it really is like you should definitely treat it as a hobby, and like a hobby you should be reasonable with it, but it's honestly like one of the most fun I've had doing anything. And so like that's kind of the problem. I am at the point where I will be going back to work soon. I feel the cattle prod behind me pushing me back, but
Oh,
in the meantime, it's been so much fun, and I would probably do it again if given the choice.
yeah, no, it sounds like it's been a nice creative year. I mean, the mod has for regardless of what I said about it only having Act 1. I see you guys adding different types of elves or something I was curious about. You guys do like a lot of contests for coat of arms and other things. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, like talking about ways for people to help with the mod, like that's kind of like the first step, like identifying these things that I can offload to the community, like character creation. I could spend a long time making like good, attractive looking elves, but the community is really good at that. That's something you don't have to be a programmer to be good at.
Mhm.
Same thing with coat of arms. People have been submitting like amazing coat of arms that would take me hours and hours to figure out to make myself. So those are like perfect avenues to get like community driven development going. Um, and then like yeah, you reward the community with like special titles and they get access to the special server channels and everybody wins. It's just like a I don't know, mutually beneficial thing to do, and
Yeah.
it's really helped the mod out.
And so the Discord, I think your Discord is quite large from the last time I checked. How are you doing managing that? This is again for people who are thinking of maybe leading a mod, especially from your perspective. Again, I'm going to keep saying solo developer. Someone's going to have to do a count, but you're like the only person realistically who has a huge stake in the mod besides the people who like it. Like, how are you managing the community? Do you have any difficulties? How have you been doing it from that side?
Honestly, it hasn't been too bad. I had barely been on Discord before I started work on the mod, so I was learning everything as I went. But there was just like a good, solid group of people from the very beginning who were like very dedicated to the mod. They loved playing it. They loved giving feedback, and so I kind of anointed them as mods. But like, I haven't had a toxic community problem. I barely have to do any moderation at all. Which I feel kind of lucky, other than scammers. Like I ban a few scammers every day, but
Yeah, of course.
like we don't have many like big arguments or stuff. I think it's just a very positive group, and I've lucked out in that way. I have mods, but they're more there to just like remove blatantly bad stuff.
Mhm.
They don't. We're kind of a hands-off community, and everyone seems to get along pretty good. So I feel blessed in that way.
Oh, that's wonderful. So something we talked about right before we got on this call, and I wanted to make sure we saved it. So we were talking about the importance of, or the importance for certain creatives to be anonymous. I'm somebody who values that. You are too. We've talked about that a little bit, but so we were discussing briefly some of the content that's in Elf Destiny that maybe you don't love. Do you want to elaborate on that at all, and the reason why you maybe put it in for somebody who maybe feels like community pressure if they make their own mod and deciding on what you would put in a mod that
Yeah,
that doesn't compromise you too much. You know what I mean?
for sure. So like anonymity, however you say it, is important to me. Just in that like when you make something like this, you're kind of expressing yourself, and not that I don't want to share that with people in real life, but I don't want to share that. I'm a bit shy. If maybe that's one of my traits, but um, and there is content that there's no content in the mod that goes beyond maybe what the base game has, but I say there's a drop of loot in it. There's just a drop, just a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to share that with real people. Kind of a philosophy of the mod is to be like vanilla plus. I think the vanilla expanded RimWorld mods are by far the best mods just because they take parts of the game and they turn it up to 11. And that's kind of what I've done with some of the themes in the mod or in the game.
Mhm.
Like, hey, there's a pure blood trait. Well, maybe there should be a pure blood and a purest blooded trait. And that doesn't mean this is supposed to be an incest simulator, but it's in there, right? So it's
Right.
like that's already a base game feature. I'm just elevating, turning up. And I think I just kind of focus on the parts of the game people seem to enjoy, making their perfect Giga Chad ruler kings, and I turn it up to 11. And that's kind of one of my design philosophies.
No,
But
that's
something
great.
like that's hard to explain to a normie who's never played the game before.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause from an outside perspective, it looks really weird. I mean, you're not the only mod that does that. The Realms and Exile team has, I believe, with Numenorian blood. If they might even be with elves too, but there's like Numenorian tiers of blood, and I think there's like 5 or 6 of them, and that
That's
inevitably requires you to intermarry with at least Numenorians. Which, I mean, the pool's not very big, so you can do the math for yourself. I don't think that that's too compromising from just my perspective, and I'm not somebody who, if anybody has watched me, plays optimally. I don't, I'm not doing that at all. But I think that the option existing, because it did happen in a historical sense, that even if it was limited, like, it's fine. But I totally understand where you're coming from, where you're like, maybe I don't want to show somebody that knows me off the street, like, hey, here's my mod that lets you play incest with your family members so that you can be pure blooded. Like, it does. I understand where you're coming from.
Right, and that's why I also I emphasize it's just a drop of lewd. I don't add nudity that's not there. I don't add
Mhm.
sex scenes. It's not one of those mods. But there's a little bit of an adult content, and like you said, I just don't want to share that with. And it's such a hard thing because I am very proud of the mod. I love it. I would love to tell everybody I know about it. But that's just kind of like a inner battle I have to face. Like, nope, this is just for you to enjoy, and it's a shame you can't share it with people, but that's just the way it is.
So, with not sort of a jump from the content idea, but you talked a little bit about how you use AI art. This is, I think, the only mod that I'm talking to, at least for this portion. If I do another one of these, there might be another one, but that uses AI art. And I'm not somebody who has a problem with it, but have you ever received any feedback regarding that from other people or other modders?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's probably one of the there's not a ton of criticisms for the mod, but it's probably one of the more constant ones, and it's completely fair. And I totally get it, and I really wish that I had the skills. I think over time, as it becomes more ambiguous, it won't be so much of an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do think that people might not have a full understanding of how the AI works. Like, everybody's aware of AI slop, right? You see these images and you know right away, oh, that's AI slop. It's garbage. You can tell it's AI. And it takes like a lot of finesse to actually get it past that uncanny valley to actually be something good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like true artists, people who are artists today, are going to be the best at AI art by far because they know things like composition and lighting and stuff. I'm definitely not even close to being great. It still takes me ages to get anything presentable, and there is a lot of work in it. It's not like I type one sentence and the first result. You still have to finesse it for hours
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. But it is a fair criticism. It's a shame. Like, it's just an issue of the modern world. It's a side effect, and I do hope that artists evolve with it and become the best at it. Is my hope.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Is there anything in the mod that you're looking forward to adding in the near future? Now that the chapter 3 is over, as you said earlier in the interview, it came out today. It ended today. Wandering Nobles is here. So is there anything that you're in the next couple months, while there's no DLC, and so you won't have to worry too much about comp patching, or that you are looking forward to adding?
Yeah, so like and we to bring it all together, I'm working on the community on a couple big features. One of them high demand is to add like evil dark elves to the game
Mm-hmm.
and add like evilish dark traditions for them, like blood magic and human sacrifice and human slavery and all these other
Yeah,
themes
right.
that are kind of just a little darker. And it's a big project, so that might still be many months away, but that's like the next big drop that's probably going to come.
That'll be pretty exciting. I am a person who, even though in real life I would say that I'm fairly mild and good, I hope, but I love playing as evil characters. So I love when mods
Yeah.
like go for it, and it sounds very much like you're leaning into the Warhammer fantasy dark elf
Yeah,
trope
and there
where
is like a Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say where they're like almost cartoonishly evil, which I think is good. I think it's fun.
Exactly, exactly. Like I already have the good guy elves, and even the good guy elves are kind of a little morally gray. But I need the dark bad guy elves too. And there is like a little bit of a morality system in the mod. There's like one decision so far. I do want it to expand where you can be good bad. You could be good guy dark elves, and you can be bad guy good elves, and it'll be kind of. I just like player choice, and I think that kind of system's good in every game that is put in.
No, absolutely. Do you have any intention in the future of adding anything else besides elves? I know that would be weird to Elf Destiny, but have you thought about doing like another race or anything, or maybe like another mod that would add that? I doubt it, just because it seems like this takes up a lot of your time. But I was curious.
Don't doubt it. Don't doubt it. Actually, on the official roadmap, there's like a little picture of Gimli all the way at the end. I do want to do like a dwarf mod too, just because I think elves and dwarves go so well together, and dwarves are like another race that could exist on Earth kind of thing. They're not too far out there.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to keep it like somewhat grounded fantasy, like believable fantasy, and dwarves kind of fit that to me. I don't know what we're gonna call it, if it's Dwarf Rising or something like that, but they and also just community sentiment is like, hey, dwarfs should be next. So that's on the far horizon, maybe even like years away, but one day.
No, I think honestly, this is this is the Soul Tomato recommendation. Just call it Dwarf Destiny. I think that's really funny. And
The Destinies, yeah, I like them.
and since you have the archaeology thing, this is just me spitballing. I've been for some reason imbuing all of these with my terrible advice. But since dwarves are like a Nordic specific mythology thing, I would say definitely look there whenever you do start, like going up north into like Norway, Scandinavia, Finland, Denmark, and like maybe having something up there that you would explore. But anyway, do you have anything in closing? Because we are running around 30 minutes. I'm trying to keep everybody's interviews. Some of them are running a little bit over, but do you have anything in closing that you want to talk about, or just anything you want to shout out? Have you been actually, before we do that, have you had any interactions with the co-op at all, the mod co-op?
Yeah, actually, a pretty decent amount. When I was first learning, they were a huge help. So I was one of the people just asking questions in there. I do jump in to help answer questions sometimes when I'm feeling it, but I did sign up for the ModCon this last year.
Mhm.
I was one of the mods that presented there, and that's a whole talk about a lot of work. That was a ton of work. I it helped me build new skills. I learned video editing, something I know
Yep.
about, but I had never even touched. I made a trailer. I did a mod jam. I never thought I would do a mod jam. That was super fun. Like it was a great experience. I was thrilled to do it. I hope they do another one this year. And yeah, the mod co-op is such a great resource if you're learning to mod. Like hop in there. Everyone's pretty friendly. Advice I give is if you ask a question, try to like research it first. Like if you show people that you took steps to learn, they're way more willing to give you whatever answer you need.
No, that's great. So before I let you go, before I let you do your closing, so you're a Lord of the Rings fan. You like fantasy. What is your favorite fantasy world besides Middle Earth?
Man,
I know it's tough.
okay. Besides Middle Earth, I don't know. Recently, this is kind of a niche in the fantasy, but like
That's okay.
I've been a big fan of two of them. Okay, one of them's not so niche. I like they're called the Spellmonger series.
Okay.
It's like about a wizard who becomes a stronger wizard, and the whole series is him becoming a bigger and badder wizard.
Mhm.
And then another one is like these. Have you ever heard of Lit RPG? It's like
Yeah.
yeah. So I've been like getting to those, and there's one. It's like called like the Good Guy series or something like that. And I've never been more addicted to a book series. It's like a whole new genre I didn't really know about, and now I've read like I think he's had like 30 books at this point. Eric Ugland, I think, is the author's name, and highly recommended. Very good.
Oh
Some
my
of the best
God.
out there.
30 books. That's insane. That's like the Discworld or I was gonna say trilogy, but the Discworld series is like 40 something books. Obviously, they're
Well, they
not.
go quick on Audible. Like
Oh yeah.
I probably listen to more books than read nowadays, and each one's about 8 hours. So you fly through them
Oh
doing
yeah.
chores and stuff.
That's not bad at all. No. Well, thank you for your time again. Do you have anything that you'd like to share before we let you go?
I would just give the generic like, hey, if you've ever thought about modding before, like seriously give it a try. It's like it can be. It's not as hard as you think it's going to be, even if you have no coding experience. Like, start small, set small goals, and like you slowly get it piece by piece, and it is super fun once you get the ball rolling. And you should come try Elf Destiny. You should come hang out on our Discord and come join our community.
Awesome. Thank you, East Pointed. So I'm here with Mac Misha, formerly Mac Monica of the After the End team. You are the current lead. How are you today?
Good. I haven't actually changed my username. That's just like a little sticker thing.
Oh,
But
okay.
I'm doing good.
Yeah, I was confused about that because I was like, who the hell is Mac Misha? Where's Mac Monica? Okay, so it's Mac Monica. So we were just talking about this briefly right before we got on the call. So you were elected as the lead coming into Crusader Kings 3 or like shortly thereafter. How has that experience been? What is your experience with the team? When did you officially come into this After the End team?
I've been around since 2019. I first got into AT right after it released, like around when Nova Scotia came out. Actually, for my term, I was elected almost exactly 1 year ago. Slightly more. It was October 20th. So it's been an interesting year. We got onto Steam. There's been a lot of interesting updates, and yeah.
Yeah, how has the jump been to Steam? Because I recall definitely in the earlier days, right before you guys made the move, everybody would constantly complain that the mod wasn't on Steam. I'm assuming that it's been a lot less complaint heavy.
Yeah, we've got a really great reception. It took a lot of work to get to the Steam version, but we've been having pretty smooth sailing.
Yeah.
Currently, we're just focusing on updating to Roads to Power.
Mm. How's progress on that been?
Pretty good. It's a really huge update. It required us to do hu- a huge amount of work, like isolating code. It's the sort of work for a while where you can't just, run a, just check the error log. It required actually running things, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we're just sort of like, we finally found the last few haystacks of what the needles are in.
Okay. And do you want to share what those issues are, if by any chance?
Currently, it's just a crash to desktop with some of the stuff related to the good legends for some reason, a few other things.
Interesting. That
Just
is.
a mysterious paradox code that suddenly stops working.
So have you been? So you obviously came on the mod in 2019. I'm going to ask you this first, and then I'll jump to another question. What is your? So everybody kind of has like a pet region. I noticed when working with you guys behind the scenes. What is your region that you particularly like, or that maybe contributed to before you became the lead?
Well, I was always interested in the off-map stuff beforehand, but I also just generally contributed to the West Coast because that's the region I'm from.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm from the Intermountain West, but I'm always gonna, favor that little area.
Mm-hmm. So are there any features of that are specific to you that you've added to the mod?
Uh, well, I've mostly just been like expanding the title histories and other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
As a lead, I haven't been able to focus as much as like when I was just working on the project as a common developer. I kind of focus everywhere.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So as a lead, have you noticed your capacity to actually mod has been diminished because you guys are fairly organized? Because I obviously am on your dev Discord and I see you organizing your monthly meetings. Are you mostly just in a administrative role now as a lead?
Yes, and I also kind of act as an editor, like comment on people's ideas, talk with them, refine it, that sort of thing, and oversee what the teams are doing, etc.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you have how big is the team now?
Let me see. Probably around I can actually just check this on there.
Okay, we're getting a live look.
There's currently 51 people
Oh my
minus
goodness.
the ones. I'd say about 30 are active or so.
Okay, so there's some people that maybe come in incrementally.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a lot. But do you have experience managing things in general? Because that's a lot for one person to, corral?
I have a couple levels of experience. I was working on I was the lead dev of a submod for After the End previously called After the End Eurasia, but that slowed a bit as I can't pay attention anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It was, kind of like After the End, but in Europe.
Okay, yeah. And was that for CK3 too or CK2?
CK2, it was a project I started or that was started in 2019 with some other people.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't the original lead. I sort of inherited it there, so it was a learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
I also took game design it wasn't like a minor or major, but I took a few classes in high school and college
Mm-hmm.
too.
So have you been a person who's been interested in modding in general, or I guess game design in general for a while? And do you happen to remember the first game you modded, or was it CK2?
The first game I modded was probably CK2 and Victoria 2.
Okay.
Though I only really did personal mods until 2019. Before that, I just sort of changed like setups, fixed bugs for myself, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. What made you make the jump?
Well, I met someone on a visual novel project called Edelweiss. I'd been originally pointed that way, the visual novel, by the member of the Kaiserreich team I knew.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got involved there, and one of the people on the team was the was a part of After the End. So I got involved with the community, and quickly after there, I started modding because I've loved After the End since I don't know when the map was really new. Maybe 2013 or 14. I don't remember
Oh, was it that
exactly, but it's
old?
been like 10. Yeah, After the End's actually had its 10 has actually had its 10 anniversary this year too.
Oh my goodness. Did you guys do anything for that? I can't recall.
Uh, we had a few announcements, and if we have time, we're thinking of doing like a little video about it.
Oh, very cool. That would be interesting. I would definitely be interested either in watching it as a baseline or participating if you need any assistance, of course.
That would always be appreciated.
Yeah, of course.
As I've said, I am a fan of your videos.
Oh, well, thank you. I would hope so. I'm a fan of them too, to a degree, as much as one person can be a fan of themselves. But out of everything I know about After the End, it's obviously not, now that I know it's a 10-year long mod, there is a lot of real life influence put into each of its different regions and different aspects. How do you as a team decide what goes into the mod? Because you could get a little ridiculous, but it seems like you guys have been trying to become more grounded as the mod has progressed. How do you, I guess, democratically decide on what you do?
Well, we have a process where we build consensus, but the more important thing is there's sort of a tradition to the project. It was originally set up by Ophalo about 10 years ago. He's currently a Paradox dev, but anyway, the idea was both to have a setting where it was a knights and castles in North America, but it was also supposed to have a certain amount of verisimilitude with people like take like regional identities and all those little other aspects of Americana and expand them. Ophalov was a big fan of things like, say, a Canticle of Leibowitz, but
Hmm.
also like that sort of transition period between the classical era and in the Middle Ages. So he kind of took that perspective of like looking at how like the various Roman provincial cultures developed, etc. We don't have quite the same thing, but there's always been that sort of like grounding to it.
Hmm. Was that more of a focus, I guess, of the CK2 version then?
hmm There were two. There were two different CK2 versions. The original, that's why for example, the CK2 version was called the fan fork, was because it sort of transitioned after he couldn't take care of it anymore.
Oh, I see. So the development basically stopped, and then that version of the mod, I guess, ceased, and then the fan fork was sans his vision.
It had some overlap, but yeah, there's been a number of different versions of ATE basically.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and I've wanted to talk about that. So obviously, there's some pretty big differences between the two, like the CK2 and CK3 version in particular. I've seen some criticism vocally about there not being the Holy Columbian Confederacy. It was changed to the Commonwealth and other things. How do you, as a team, or especially I guess as a lead, since you're the face of the mod, how do you manage that criticism, or do you just generally brush it off and try to avoid controversy whenever possible?
Well, you're always going to have people criticizing you. It's a sort of a balance between taking in, a good criticism and criticism that isn't workable.
Mm-hmm.
And also sometimes people just have their own artistic vision on the team. One of the things about ATE is it's always been quite open to people's contributions and it's willing to change. Well, there's always been like core features we're not going to remove. For example, like Americanist. We're pretty open to like if you have a fresh new take and you're willing to implement it and have good ideas,
Mm-hmm.
then you can do so.
So with that open, I mean, especially with such a large team and with that open policy, do you worry that the mod will become too disjointed in its vision, or do you try to not have a centralized vision for it, and you just kind of want it to be what people themselves want it to be?
Well, we do have some guidelines and other things, but I think that sort of like strong core identity that came from the original mod,
Hmm.
it sort of helps avoid that.
Okay. So recently, I've noticed, as far as updates go, because I wanted to talk about now that Roads to Power, you obviously talked about it a little bit. It's been out, and now the newest DLC came out today at the time of recording this. So you'll have some time to patch. I've noticed that a lot of the recent updates have been mostly related to faiths. So it's just been sort of like adding new faiths. Are there any more substantial updates that you guys have planned in the future, like maybe feature heavy, as opposed to just, adding new faiths that are in CK3? That's a CK3 problem. They're a little less interfaceable. If that makes sense.
You could say so. Part of the reason that it's been seemingly small, is we've been focusing on other things.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, though I'm gonna keep a little coy on that because it hasn't been announced yet.
Oh no, that's okay. Do you have any? Can you give us any hint as to maybe not the region, but like the nature of the update? Like what would it add?
Hmm.
You can be
Well,
vague.
expect a lot more in-depth government types now that we have new tools, is one
Oh,
thing.
okay. I I think I noticed something about tournament events. I think I saw like football was something that was getting added soon. Are you going to be adding more things like that as well?
Yeah, we should be.
Okay. So
I
with
will say we're also been cursing the whole hiking event because we spent about a year making our own system only for them to have that
oh
added in today.
that is a shame. Have you messed around with the new system at all?
I haven't had a chance to poke around at the Wandering Lord stuff at all.
Okay, I was going to say it works really well. I think it could be something fun, especially with all of the excuse me, unique landmarks with after the end. I think you guys will have a lot of fun with it. But as somebody who's made a few lore videos, speaking of those unique landmarks, a few lore videos on the mod, and noticed some pretty big changes to certain aspects, like faiths having complete reworks. Is there anything like that in the works, like culturally or regionally, that you guys maybe don't like anymore and you want to change that you're planning on doing?
Well, sorry, we do have we do have intentions on doing some regional reworks because some of those areas haven't been touched in a few years and could use some oversight.
Hmm. Do you have any examples?
Hmm. Texas, for example, is one that might get a look-see over.
Okay. Any particular reason?
It's the region's been kind of for example has characters and all the other things, but it hasn't had like the same touch that other places have.
Okay. So I'm going to shift now a little bit away from after the end and just talk a little bit more about modding in general. So you came into CK2 as a modder, and then obviously Victoria. So you're familiar with Paradox, like their system as a whole. How do you feel that is like user friendly wise for people who want to get into modding?
Well, given that the Paradox script is human readable and and there's lots of great tutorials out there in a very friendly community, anyone can get into modding if you just put the time in.
Hmm. Have you? So what? When you first started out, what sort of mods were you making? And then I guess how did you decide to make the jump? Because I feel like that's a pretty common place to start, where you make your own mod and then you go over to maybe a team. What made you like really want to do that?
Well, I was originally just doing small quality of life changes, you know?
Hmm.
For example, like we're making small event chains, for example, so that I could have a little, have my own little story in Victoria too, for example.
Hmm.
What
Okay.
made me transition over, I guess, is that I've always been really passionate about After the End. So actually being able to contribute really excited me.
It definitely is a world that seems like people they gravitate more towards it because it has those real world parallels, which I think is really neat. I've definitely been tickled to see certain aspects of places that I've lived being accurately represented. And how do you guys do that? I think I've talked a little bit about or a little bit to you guys about this. Do you have a lot of community feedback when it comes to that?
It's community feedback, devs working on areas that they're from, or people just doing research on areas. There's a lot of work put into like making sure the maps are well, the original map has been for the CK free version was made by processing, GIS data,
Hmm.
geographical information system, I believe. Sorry, I'm just looking that up.
Oh, it's
But
all right.
basically putting in like a satellite map. So one way you can contribute actually is if you notice something's weird about the map in their current version, like for your local area, tell us because we're currently adjusting it to fit better. But yeah, we do a lot of research on local cultures, geography, and other things to try and make it feel more resonant with people.
Interesting. So with such a big team too, I would imagine because I've noticed with After the End in particular, you have a lot of unique models. Do you guys have a modeler on the team? Since you're talking about mapping, it made me think of this.
We do have we have a number of great modelers. One of them is Kiefer. He's who's also on a couple of other teams. I believe a Game of Thrones as well.
That mod always gets brought up. I really wish I would have had them in this video, maybe in the next one. But so he works for a lot of different things. That's really cool. Are there any exciting models? You don't have to say where, but do you maybe anything in particular you want to talk about?
Hmm. I might say one thing to expect upcoming is remember the Alamo.
Oh, that is exciting. So I guess as a lead and as somebody who came on, you were interested initially in a sub mod. Is there any area of the mod that maybe you didn't work on that you just that you're very fond of, besides like maybe California, because you obviously said that you're, or like not California, the West Coast, because you said you're from there.
Ah, well, I am always impressed by Brazil in the mod currently.
Hmm.
It's was made by it's been a bunch of people making it, but the Brazil team has always been doing consistently amazing work. And
Yeah.
they show a real passion for I feel like one thing is just Brazil isn't represented very much in you know, media at all. So it gave them a chance to really represent the pop culture, history, and just local cultures of their very large country.
No, I feel that's absolutely true. I've definitely learned things myself just from the unique, I guess, religions that are in the game. I think the modernists in particular, it has been a treasure trove of me fiercely Googling things that I've never heard of, which has been cool. Are they going to be implementing the admin government at all for that? I would assume California is.
They've been working on that as we speak right now. We're also probably going to have a admin government for High Republic governments because republics have always been a big part of AT just because of the relationship of republicanism and the various cultures of the Americas.
Right. No, absolutely. That makes total sense. So with adding new government types, is there also planned, because this is something that I'm curious about because I love this aspect of mods. Are there any quest lines currently in the works, like new ones, new decision trees?
Hmm. I've been currently proposing one for proposing one for a starting ruler. I'm gonna
Oh,
keep it a little bit ambiguous though, but let's say might have a young ruler dealing with some Byzantine-esque problems.
oh, very interesting. Yeah, no, I think that mods should lean more into creating like systems like that are more uniquely them. I think After the End does a good job of it with, you obviously have like Constantine and a couple other characters who have their own trees, but it's definitely something that I love to see, and I'm always curious to see if it's happening more. Are there any major plans besides integrating the DLC that you guys have for the next, I guess, few months now that the DLCs are all out?
Well, a lot of it's just like using it to expand our own, expand, like say make the republics better and other things. But there's also some, we've also been poking at putting some interesting things in California and other regions as well.
Mm-hmm.
We have a smaller project with passionate regional devs, so you should see more content and just compatibility.
Oh, well, that is excellent to hear then. So I guess, do you, because again it's a big team and it sounds like you allow this, do you have like micro leads then for different regions that you'll just like, okay, I trust you enough to start working on this, and then maybe you'll just pop in every once in a while to see what's going on?
Yeah, we do. For example, the Brazil team is one such example.
Okay, so how many people are on that?
About 5.
That's pretty impressive. So they'll have like a lead, they'll work, and then they'll report to you, and you'll basically give your feedback. Do you have a lot of feedback if it's something you're not that in, or it's something that you're not that familiar with?
Uh, I just kind of check in, see how things are going, and let them do do what they've been doing for years now.
Yeah, I guess that is the benefit. Who's the longest serving, or how many people have came over from the CK2 team? Like, would you say?
Let's see. Kelt was with the original mod, so he's been here about 10 years or so,
Oh
but
wow, so the whole
not
time.
kind of Uh, there's been a lot of turn, going between versions though. The CK3 version, has had just like a lot of turnover just between me and like the previous project, etc. We had like a transition for a bit because of people's real lives.
No, absolutely. And then plus, how do you manage that? Real life. You're a lead of this massive mod and massive team. Like, how are you managing that? Do you have like a very demanding job, or are you just one of those lucky ones who maybe has a little more free time?
Uh, Delegation helps, and we have like a proposal system where, things get discussed on a forum on our server and, development server, and that helps too. Because it's not like a system where it's just waiting on one person. It can get feedback from a bunch of people, but you also can't just post this is bad, etc. There's expected to be constructive feedback, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I also find that using tools like ClickUp and other, dev tools really helps with time.
Have you had to deal with much, I guess, conflict within the team? Again, I'm only asking this just because you have such a large team. I think you're the largest team that I'm talking to for this, so it's just you have a lot of potentially conflicting ideas or beliefs about the vision. Does that come up?
Whenever you have a group of people collaborating, there's always going to be disagreements, but no, it's been pretty smooth sailing for the last year, honestly.
Okay.
You just I I do have worked a lot on like, avoiding, escalation of conflict and making sure everyone feels heard, but also just not but also making sure it doesn't, just degrade into, sh- pure, trying to figure out how to put it, like, every idea having to please everyone.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely. You have to take a stance at some points with things that are going on. So I've been talking to a few different mod teams about this. So Patreon, After the End, has one, correct?
It's my personal one. I'm basically doing a little bit of extra work for outside of being a lead to write things. I do it with a couple of other people as like a side project, and then that money, helps me pay for the DLC and, build up an art fund, etc.
Okay, so do you use the money also for, I guess, commissioning art for the mod at all?
Yeah, we've been building up. Yeah. So, if any of you out there are artists looking for a commission, our old one is moved on to professional work. So,
Oh, that is a good shout. Is there any other needs that you have currently within the mod?
we could always use more 3D modelers and artists right now. We
Mm,
always just need people in general.
yeah.
But yeah, the art style is actually pretty important to us. Each one of our custom loading screens is designed with, to represent the world of ATE and actually has meaning behind things.
No, absolutely. I think that the visual style of ATE is probably one of its strongest aspects. It has a very specific feel. That is good to know. So what is I'm trying to think. So with After the End, it obviously it's a big open-ended mod, but is there ever or is there some sort of ultimate goal that you can foresee as the lead for the mod in general that like you would get to this point and you'd be like, okay, I could reasonably say that this is like what I would want the mod to look like, and then everything else is just icing on top.
Well, I'll say that the admin government type has been a godsend because back in like the CK2 version, High Republics were really important.
Hmm.
I guess I just would like to get while we've moved on, moved forward quite a bit, we're still not as like complete or complicated as the CK2 version was at the end. Just to keep working on it and, get to, just keep it on as a labor of love.
Hmm. No, that makes total sense.
Ideally, all of the map would have, had been worked on by someone passionate about it at some point.
It is interesting because it's as a mod that's been going on for so long and with so many people, it sort of has this archival, archaeological nature to it, where there's aspects of it that have been added to and loved by different people over different parts of their lives, and I think that that's a really wonderful thing. It has a lot of that been retained from the CK2 version, or is the CK3 more focused on the current team?
Well, we like to respect people's past contributions, but also to always leave it open for new people to reinvent.
Hmm. Oh, that's great. This is a unique perspective too that you can offer as somebody who has been a person working on a mod, because this isn't something that I don't think has come up, where you were like a developer and then you were selected to become the lead. What is that experience like, and what were the challenges, I guess, that you faced when shifting between those two roles?
Well, I didn't expect to win, I'm going to be honest. I'd been taking a break for a bit and just sort of, one of my friends encouraged me to, and I sort of got in last minute. So it was a bit of a dark horse victory for me and everyone else. I guess it was a big change to, learning how to administrate such a big project.
Are you glad to have done that? Like, obviously, you seem to have had to take some coaxing. So, are you happy with that decision? Do you enjoy doing it?
I I've had I really care about AT quite a bit, and I work with great people on it, so I've had fun doing it. There's been a lot of hard work at times, to catch up with things. For example, getting it to Steam took a lot of time,
Hmm.
but I'm happy with the results, and I get to meet interesting people, and I get to make a mod guide a mod that was created by people that I care about.
Yeah, I mean that's wonderfully said. So I am looking at my time, a little getting close to 30 minutes. I'm trying to keep everybody around 30 minutes, as I've said a couple times in this video. So I apologize to the people who are watching or listening, rather, who have heard me say that before. But do you have anything in closing, any advice, anything like that that you would like to share with the listeners?
I would encourage anyone if they're interested in modding to give it a go. It's a great hobby, and you can and may and maybe you can create something that'll last 10 years. See create an idea and see how it grows and changes. Plus, the CK free mod co-op is incredibly friendly, so don't be afraid. And if you ever want some advice or just to ask about this or something about the mod, feel free to DM me.
Oh, that's very kind. And the mod co-op has been getting a lot of shout outs, so that will definitely be linked in the description. Don't you guys worry if you are a modder or somebody interested in modding who wants to check that out. But I want to thank you for your time, Mac. I appreciate you coming on and giving us some of your insights.
No, thank you, Soul Tomato.
Yeah, of course.
And I hope you have a good rest of your day.
And finally, for our last interview, I have Flint Spark here, the lead and the creator, from what I understand, of the Princess of Darkness mod. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
I am good. So did I get that right? You are the creator, correct?
I am in fact the creator. I started it back in 2014, maybe at the very end of 2013.
And what would you say was the impetus of you doing that? Like what prompted you to want to make this mod a reality?
Sure. Well, I'll give a shout out. The reason I got into Crusader Kings 2 was I had just watched, the Game of Thrones television show, and I was a big fan of strategy games like Civilization, etc. I'm like, what if I could find like a game like Civilization or the old like Middle-earth strategy war game, but set in the Game of Thrones universe? Got to be something like that out there. And I went looking for something, and I came across, the Game of Thrones mod for CK2.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, like, oh, I have to try this. Immediately got into it, loved it, but then also started playing the base game, loved that as well. And after playing it for a while, I was like, you know what would make this better? This is like a great example of history and a teaching tool and all kinds of depth. But what if, hear me out,
Mm-hmm.
we put vampires in it?
Ooh, I'm already sold.
Yeah.
So
I was a big World of Darkness fan since the first edition of Vampire the Masquerade back in 1991. So it seemed like the perfect sort of intrigue setting to bring through like the Vampire Masquerade intrigue of these dynastic characters.
Mm-hmm. So you've been there since the beginning. Like you've been a fan of the tabletop setting since it was created, basically.
I am. I have been a fan of World of Darkness since it was created. So I've been there since, and I first got my start with tabletop role-playing games with the Red Box D&D back in the 5th grade.
Oh my goodness. So obviously you're an actual vampire. I think I didn't really stress that at the beginning of the interview. What is that like?
There's no such thing as vampires. So that's just propaganda.
Oh my god. The radical anti-vampire coalition's coming at me strong again. So you've been making this mod now for a decade. When you think about it, it's a long time to be in charge of anything, like even in like any work setting. How do you manage to do that with the changes that life has brought to you over the past 10 years?
Oh, well, by obviously the unquestioning loyalty of the devs. Not really. I've mostly been the lead dev, but at times I've had to take breaks over 10 years to do other things in my life. And I have got a great co-lead dev in Card. And he's been able to pick up the slack when I wasn't. But a large of what we do for management is we manage most of the mod and its development via Discord and GitHub. Mm-hmm. The early days of Princess of Darkness for CK3, we actually just had a lot of spreadsheets we were using to track things. But eventually we expanded using GitHub's issues and project tracking system. And then we also use, Discord's forum feature to do bug tracking and threads like that. Mm-hmm. As compared to a lot of other total conversion teams, Prince of Darkness is actually quite small. At any time, we don't ever have more than a dozen devs working on the team, and usually it's half of that. It's about half of that. So, but the other advantage I think we would have that maybe some other total conversion mods don't have is that World of Darkness is an extremely lore-rich, heavy setting. I think we are getting close to now 3,000 canon characters, and it's the setting is spread all over the world. So oftentimes it's just how do we translate this information to CK2 and to the infrastructure that we've built up. And so that's actually led us to do and rewrite things so that it makes sense. But largely the mod focuses on ad hoc. Developers decide what they want to work on, how much effort they want to put into it, and they go for it. Sometimes we all come together to work on a particular release, like we all came together to work on our werewolf release. Other times it's a collaboration. Primarily the Fae Changeling bookmark was myself and another developer, Chile. We put that together. Sometimes a whole splat is just a particular developer, like Chile put together the Mummy splat all by himself.
And is there, because I'm not familiar, is there lore, is that pulling from the lore like these other splats, or is that just mostly from the mind of the dev?
Oh no, almost everything in Princess of Darkness is from the lore of World of Darkness. It's a tabletop role-playing game that's existed for more than 30 years now, that's had hundreds, thousands of books maybe at this point,
Oh my God.
across 5 big game lines and a whole universe reboot and a video game and a television show and graphic novels and character novels. It's just a huge amount of lore to get through, and we've not even touched one of the biggest game lines yet, which was Mage of the Ascension.
So how do you keep track of all that? Because I remember I was actually going to do a lore video, or like try to do a lore video for Princess of Darkness a couple months ago, and I think I stopped after I got like 6 pages in, and I was still talking about Cain. So how do you guys manage that?
Right. Well, I mean, we lean into the mechanics of Crusader Kings 3. Crusader Kings 3 is the most character-focused grand strategy game that Paradox puts out. It's very character-centric. So most of our lore goes into building those characters, but then also, there are coalitions of characters like clans or werewolf tribes and whatnot, and we customize our decisions for either what the individual character would do or what a character in that clan might do, and that writes a lot of it. We also benefit, since the World of Darkness is the same world as our own world, except darker, though.
Right.
Sometimes admittedly it's hard to see, is it really darker or not. So we don't have the burden of developing our own map. We got to use the Crusader Kings 3 map. That's been fine for our purposes for the Dark Ages 1230 AD setting, which is focused largely on Europe, but not only on Europe. So we don't have the burden of doing map making, but we do have to know, like, oh well, who was Prince of Paris in 1230 AD? Who was Prince of London? And then extrapolate out from there. Some areas we have taken a little bit of liberty for from the lore, because typically vampires, as an example, all cluster like in the same city. And so we kind of treat each duchy as effectively a metropolitan area. And so we'll hand out counties to get other characters landed so they can be part of it. And that fills up the map. In fact, we have a patron program where people, throw us a little money and we put their custom character in the game. And right now, basically, we can't put custom characters landed in Europe anymore, because every county is filled by a canon character or an already existing patron character. So we are thick with characters.
Oh my God.
In terms of tracking that, we have a spreadsheet where we track all the canon characters that we add. But otherwise, we try to self-document both in the code and in tooltips about what's going on with the mod. We have tried to started using GitHub Project more, particularly when we're building out a new step, and say like, okay, well, we know we're going to need to have faiths and traits and dynasty legacies and objective decisions, and what graphical assets will we need, what coat of arms will we need, what landed titles will we need. So we do try to make a list of everything we expect to need for, say, building out a bookmark, who the future characters will be, and open those up as tickets for anybody on the team to pick up and process and check off when they're done. And we also largely leave quality assurance testing to both the individual developers themselves and also our patrons. Our patrons are our first line of quality assurance testing on everything in the mod. The development build of the mod gets updated several times a day at this point by our small team. Not true every day, but most days we have a couple updates coming through. And our patrons dutifully download the mod and tell us what's broken. So that's why when we eventually release something to Steam Workshop, it's usually mostly working with only a few bugs.
And so what is the money otherwise besides just the donations? Does that go towards the mod, like allocating art or getting music made or anything like that?
Absolutely, absolutely. For instance, we pay Serial Symphony, Skip, to actually make our original soundtrack, which is now 3 albums long, themed for vampires, werewolves, and changelings. We don't actually have on our development staff permanently a 3D artist. So a lot of the 3D assets we've been using, particularly for our development of like the werewolf and Farah, have been assets that we've got from, say, CG Trader or Sketchfab that we then incorporate into the mod. But we don't actually have, at the moment, someone dedicated to doing sculpting in Blender or Maya. We have in the past, but just not right now. So we bought a number of models that way. There's infrastructure we pay for, like maintaining our website, etc. And also, we do gift out some of our patron money to our developers based on how much they've contributed in the last cycle.
That's an interesting method. That's really cool. So something I want to, I guess, rewind a little bit here. So you've been leading the mod for a while. Is this the first mod team you've ever led? Is this the first mod you've ever really made? Did you make mods before this? It sounds like you were into tabletop, but I've been trying to ask everybody sort of their origin story of becoming a modder. So was CK2 it?
No, I had done some unreleased mods for Civilization since 4, I guess, just for my own use, and I played around with the Skyrim creation kit from Bethesda some, but didn't release anything. I'm actually have an IT background though. When in college I did programming, and then as an adult professional world, I'm a Unix system administrator. And a lot of Unix system administrators sometimes involves more scripting than others. And I actually started modding partly because I wanted to get some of my scripting skills up and wanted to, practice doing some more programming, but to have a little fun with it. And that's one of the big motivations I had personally for starting this project. And then it kind of grew into its own thing. And also, the Crusader Kings engine, originally Clausewitz, but now Clausewitz Jemani, has actually improved a lot as a scripting language since the CK2 days. It's a much more powerful tool for building things. And so that's basically how I got started into it. I don't think I'll say one thing that's interesting about our development team for Princes of Darkness is almost everybody who is on the team came to modding for Crusader Kings through their love of the mod. Right? My co-lead didn't know anything about modding until he wanted to add a particular canon character to the mod, and now he has made thousands of characters, as well as writing many decisions and other mechanics. So most of our team has come about from people who played the mod, loved it, and wanted to add just one little thing, and then we provided them advice and suggestions how to do it. I even have one mod on the workshop called the PDXCon mod, which is a mod to teach modders how to mod. If people take a look at that, it mostly still works, and it will give you basically most of the tasks you need to develop your own, standalone total conversion mod, except it doesn't teach you how to make maps, and it doesn't teach you how to create artifacts. But it does generously have from El Tyrannos examples of a custom item, a golden submachine gun. There you go.
Wow. That's pretty awesome. So this is something unique to Princes of Darkness, as we're talking about, how everybody's interested in the IP. The IP, I don't know if it was owned by Paradox when you started making the mod, but it is owned by them now. Do you have a lot of overlap with them because of that, since it's technically you're making a game on something that is their property, and the mod is technically also their property? It's something I've been very curious about, as an outsider. So I just didn't know if you had any insight.
No, happy to share the deets on this. So, as I said, I go back to the original Vampire the Masquerade. At that time, it was not owned by Paradox. White Wolf was its wholly independent publishing company. And so it's changed hands a couple of times. It went to, I think, CCP Productions, the folks that make EVE Online in Iceland. They bought it when the RPG market was kind of in a downturn. White Wolf had done the original Vampire the Masquerade series and its related books. And then they did a weird thing in 2003 where they decided to end their game world in an apocalyptic event called the Final Times or Gehenna or the Ascension, where they essentially destroyed their own universe. And then, because they wanted to remake it, they wanted to do a reboot of their universe. And from that came a series of books called Vampire the Requiem, Werewolf with the Forsaken, etc. But before they got that launched, they had gotten licensed with Activision to make Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. It was actually not the first video game that was made off of Vampire. That would be Vampire the Masquerade Redemption. But Bloodlines initially released, it had a bad early release because you couldn't even finish it. I think it came out the same time as Half-Life.
It did. Same day.
But same day. And it was really buggy. But Troika Games was the folks who had developed it, that had also done the Temple of Elemental Earth. And as they had to shut down the company was essentially destroyed by the bad release of it. They basically left it open to the community to fix it. And the community fixed it. Like, it is still getting updates to Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines and developed a cult following. I think it's gotten more than 1 million sales over the length of its history of time. And the joke is that anytime someone mentions Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, someone else goes to reinstall it. So it's still a fan favorite. And so the largest property that the world ever acted from Vampire the Masquerade was in fact Bloodlines. And so once people had played Bloodlines, if they wanted to get into it, guess what? No more books from that universe. It's the rebooted universe. And also TTRPGs, tabletop RPGs, were in a bit of a decline in popularity at that point. People had moved on to, World of Warcraft, online gaming, etc. And it would be later that we had this tabletop renaissance, with just the last few years. So when I got started making the Vampire mod for Crusader Kings, it originally was from the rebooted Vampire the Requiem universe. And eventually I caved to the pressure of my fans and changed it over to Masquerade.
I see. Okay. And
but you asked, I forgot, you asked about Paradox.
Yes.
So I was working on this mod before Paradox acquired White Wolf, World of Darkness, from the EVE Online creators. And they got it and like, okay, that's interesting. Maybe I should ask them permission at one point. But I hadn't yet. And so then I decided to finally at one point release it on Steam. And once I released it on Steam, I suddenly started getting thousands of subscribers. It wasn't just like a zip file downloaded by 20 people in the forums. It was thousands of subscribers. I'm like, well, maybe I should ask them about it. And so I wrote them a nice letter. I gave them screenshots of the mod, explained what I was doing. And it's like, hey, please don't sue me. And they're like, sue you? We would never sue you. Let's run this through legal for White Wolf and Paradox. We're sure it'll be fine. You can operate under the Dark Pack license, which allows fan-created content. And they ended up changing the Dark Pack license a little bit. That made it specifically all right for Pod to do it, Princess of Darkness to do it. And so not only was that a really positive relationship and dialogue that we had with Paradox about getting permission to use this and use all the White Wolf assets that we could to do so, a little while later after that, they actually contacted me and offered me a position to work at Paradox. They needed some people to help out doing development. And one of the projects they had me work on was actually Crusader Kings 3. So I was a freelance content developer remote, which is something they didn't do a lot of at the time with the company for a while. And I worked on a lot of lifestyle events in Crusader Kings 3. Which meant I had Crusader Kings 3 before most everyone else did. And when I stopped working for Paradox, I'm like, well, I guess I should get working on transferring the mod to the new platform. Paradox has been great in terms of our access to things for Crusader Kings 3. And, we even have the benevolence of the CEO and chairman, Fred Wester. So shout out to you, Fred. Thanks so much.
Wow. That's incredible. Honestly, it's always nice to hear when a fan project is actually supported by the company that owns it. You hear so many times of, the cease and desist being sent to people from various companies like, Rockstar, for example, does it a lot with Grand Theft Auto. I think there was a renewal project for Grand Theft Auto 4 that was shut down a couple months ago, or like a year or two ago, whatever it was. But it's nice to hear that they're not only supportive, but like wholly encourage you guys to keep going. So how, I guess something that I've noticed as a person who plays, a lot of mods, I talk about a lot of mods. Princess of Darkness is unique in that it has so many of these like cutting edge features that other mods don't have. What do you think is the reason behind that? Like, how did you craft this team that is able to make, you had like the heist system early, you have all of these vampire mechanics, I mean, or even just like for the werewolves or all the other splats really have a lot of their own unique facets that a lot of mods haven't really caught up with yet. What do you think the reason is for that?
Well, first off, it's because we were first, right? Princess of Darkness as a mod released the first day that Crusader Kings 3 released. What magic is that? Well, as I said, I did work on Crusader Kings 3,
Right.
so I always have access. So we were able to release a playable version of the mod from day one. Second, we didn't have to wait, 3 to 6 months to make a unique map. We didn't have to do any mapping. We were plopping down characters, writing events, writing event chains and objective decisions, even before the game was released. So we didn't have to wait, and we have iterated every step of the way since then. So some mods only got their first release, in the last year. We've been working on it all 4 years. So it builds up over time. And also the skill sets of people on the team build up over time. And people have different specialties. Like, I'm not so good with GUI. That's a lot of D's handiwork. It's another developer, D Hoff, on our team. Great contributor. He did the voice of Siegfried in our popular heist video. He brought a lot of GUI scripting knowledge and the design around the journeys and the heists, and also our custom color systeming for clothing. At different times, we had other people on the team that did 3D development work. We had a really talented, in the very beginning, sculptor that handled a lot of our Nosferatu and Shimizu face blend shapes, Emeryville, who is also working as a professional artist and doesn't have as much time to contribute to the mod. A lot of it's luck. We actually have never put out a recruitment call for here's the skills that we need, come join the team and sign up. It's actually been far more organic, and people tend to come with skills they want, or they come with a project and they learn the skill to do it. For instance, I've finally broken down to properly learn Blender, and I'm doing a lot of work to integrate assets from Blender into the mod, both for some of those fairer shapes that we want to have for our expanded werewolf universe, but also I'm wanting to work on a lot of clothing options, because we eventually would like to do a modern knights setting, with like Uzis and people in sharp suits and skyscrapers.
Right.
We had a version of that in Princess of Darkness for Crusader Kings 2, but that was all 2D art.
Right. Yeah. No.
CK3, it's got to be 3D art, so it's developing a new list of skills. So I'm getting there.
So with the Final Nights, for example, are you planning on like moving the map over to the Americas, or just still keeping it into the current map?
That is quite a question. First, there's a concern about greatly expanding the map, how that would impact performance of CK3. Right now, Prince of Darkness actually prides itself on being a very small install for a total conversion mod. We're at like 1.7 gigabytes now, and that all like lives in memory when you run CK3, right? You download it, you're running it, and you're running that on top of already the processing requirements to run CK3. And so then when people go in and bring in like a very large mod, no names, I'm not naming any names, you know who you are, that can really overtax a lot of people's systems. So we don't want to keep people away from the game if we can. Though we can also talk about maybe releasing like a low-res version of the mod and see what we can go with that. But there's a real question on performance. The primary impact on performance in CK3 tends to be the sheer number of characters and doing things like tracking their decisions and their inheritance and whatnot. And so when you add like a whole new section of the map, you're going to be increasing the performance capability a lot because each barony has 3 characters. Each county has, I don't know, 9, 10 characters minimum, and then it expands from there. And so if you add another 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 counties, you're putting a huge load on the system. However, there has been for a number of years a Greater Earth map mod project that for a while was being picked up by the Crusader Universalis team to offer a world map for CK3. One thing they decided to innovate with was instead of having baronies, they were just going to eliminate baronies entirely and have the basic unit of the map be the county. Anybody who's played Crusader Kings 3 knows that baron characters are basically useless. They do everything that the ruler of the county wants them to do. They don't really fight back, really rebel. They're just kind of there to provide some characters with a little bit of poof in their councils, maybe to use as champions. And eliminating them would not be a big problem, I think, for gameplay terms. So that's an approach. One thing is, though, is we're such a small team. We don't actually want to devote one or two of our members to building up those province maps for that Greater Earth map. We'd like to let another team release that, and then we just plop down and settle our characters and rewrite our events and do that. So probably, if it would come to that, that would be the last thing we would do. Otherwise, we would probably continue to do what we did for Princes of Darkness for CK2, where we used the vanilla map, and so it was Eurasia, but in 2020. I think back then it was 2016.
Oh my goodness.
We would do that. A lot of interest in having our whole world map, but the whole world map also really only makes sense for World of Darkness on a modern setting, because the 1230 AD medieval bookmark, there's not enough information about what's going on in the Americas. There's just not.
Right, of course.
It would be a lot of filler that we'd have to put in, like we've already had to put a lot of filler into Africa. And we'd rather just do canon. When it comes to the world, modern setting, there's lots of canon material we could use.
Oh yeah. But are you looking forward to, making that jump, I guess, when the time comes?
So we have a list, like in GitHub, we have our project and our issues, and we have a series of issue tickets of what we need to make that transition. And so even before we start doing the bookmark, laying out the character, writing out the decisions, we know we need enough clothing assets to sell it as a setting, right? You can't have people running around in medieval garb and selling it as the modern setting. So we need a lot of modern clothing assets, a lot of, modern weapon assets, ideally maybe even changes to things like throne rooms. We know we need all of those sorts of things before they touch it. We also know that our players really want to see, before we do the modern night setting, they really want us to see Princes of Darkness do a version of Mage of the Ascension. And that is the big missing splat right now in terms of our game universe. They really want to play Mage and see how that would work out. And Mage is a challenge because in Mage of the Ascension, the characters basically warp consensual reality based on their individual personal paradigms. And in gameplay, out in the tabletop, your character can literally do almost anything you can describe as a player, right? It's not limited to I cast Magic Missile or I cast Fireball. It's the wealth and breadth of your imagination. Now there's rules and limitations of how much you can do whatever in what context, but how to do it, exactly what is done, is very open-ended. And so we have to find a way that translates that to Crusader Kings 3 that our long-term players will enjoy. It probably is going to be a lot more limited than that. We did have an experimental system for a while that basically let you do custom spells that let you add any modifier that existed in the game to your province, to your character, to whatever. That was too much. That was 1,000 different options that were all very mechanical. That's not the way to go. We need it to be fun and engaging. I'm advocating that we do it like our current Fey Changeling Arts and Realm system, where one line of lifestyles defines what you can affect, how long it lasts, what the power is, and the other one describes what you do. Is it a health extension thing? Is it a damage thing? Is it is it fire magic? Like on the other tree, something like that. And we're still working out the details of exactly how we are going to handle that mechanic, but it's very much in demand. People want it. Mage win is the current favorite question that is asked in our forums. So eventually, and there are probably two different camps. One month's Mage win, 1 month's Final Nights, and the reason they want Final Nights is not just because they want the modern setting, but they want an end game crisis like in Stellaris.
Oh, okay.
As I mentioned, World of Darkness blew up their own world back in 2003 with the Final Times, and has elaborate branching apocalyptic scenarios. And so people want an additional challenge in the mod. So, we also want to write these Gehenna style events that challenge the players at the peak of capacity in Princes of Darkness and see if they can overcome it. I'm a big Stellaris fan myself, so I would love to offer some sort of content like that.
Well, that sounds wonderful. So shifting gears a little bit here, just because I don't want you to give away all the trade secrets of what's coming up for the mod, but just in terms of modding in general, especially being a lead, or somebody who, let's just say, because this could happen to somebody else, they make a mod and you see overnight that it's exploding. How do you manage people's rapid expectations? How do you manage going from a relative unknown to being this, Princes of Darkness is now one of the biggest mods for Crusader Kings, right? I'm sure you didn't anticipate that when you started. So,
sure.
And we, right before this, the person I interviewed a couple interviews ago was Elf Destiny. You may have heard of them. They started by one person, fairly small in concept, just wanted to add elves to the world, and now it's on the second page on most popular. Like for a sub mod, it's enormous. It's enormously popular. So, what is your advice? How did you manage it? Just a general that question.
Right. So, when I got started with Princes of Darkness, my own ambition was quite small in CK2 days. I started by making a cute little bat trait that was called Vampire. Very, very modest beginnings to what it would eventually become. And but by the end of Crusader Kings 2 Lifestyle, when I was aware that Crusader Kings 3 was coming, I did have the ambition that we wanted to be one of the most popular total conversion mods that were out there. And in fact, we were in competition with Bronze Age to be the most popular for quite some time. And then as Bronze Age got set to the side, we were top subscribers. Us and Lord of the Rings battled it out for years as who was top, until Elder Kings and Game of Thrones came away and knocked us out of our lauded positions.
Right.
There are two different approaches. Very on in the beginning, one thing that's unusual about Princes of Darkness is that we kept ourselves open to comments on Steam Workshop. We have 5,000 comments on Steam Workshop, and we have a bunch of our own discussion forums. Also, we maintain our own Discord, and we have a lot of dialogue there, plus our forum on Princes of Darkness. We are very forthcoming with both what we're working on and responding to criticism and responding to bug reports. Other mod teams keep it a little closer to their chest. They don't allow comments willy-nilly on their Steam Workshop page. It's a bit harder to know what they're going along. They have a little more distance, I think, from their users. And sometimes those teams are big enough that they actually have people assigned to handling things like bug reports. At the other hand, a lot of people playing Princes of Darkness are coming from the World of Darkness RPG experience, so they kind of understand the world. They have a very good understanding. I guess one thing that's been really, really helpful for us is we have a wiki dedicated to our mod that includes guides about how to play, what the powers are, things like that. I think our wiki is very useful. It includes a frequently asked questions that answer a lot of people's concerns. And then also a lot of our patrons in our Discord have also picked up the role informally of answering people's questions and guiding them to the answers that they need.
No, and I have used that wiki before, and I think I've actually linked it in a video or two because I've had to use it for something or other while making a video for Princess of Darkness because it is daunting. And I also was curious, how much of the tabletop do you think has been, I guess, accurately depicted or as reasonably as possible in CK3?
We have accurately depicted most of Dark Ages of Empire. In addition, when it came to Dark Ages Werewolf and Dark Ages Fae, those two game lines, rather than getting like, I don't know, the 100 books that Dark Ages of Empire got, they got 2 or 3. So we were easily able to incorporate that content into the mod.
Right.
But we've expanded from their main game lines of Werewolf the Apocalypse and Changeling the Dreaming to it. To give an example on Changeling, there are these Shi noble houses, 13 noble houses that most of the Shi belong to. And initially when we launched the Changeling bookmark, we had 1 or 2 characters for each house.
Mm-hmm.
I recently, spend, I don't know, a couple of months building up those houses, and I got 4 houses having most of the characters that are canon mentioned. So it takes sometimes a long time to fully flush out what we want to show. So, I would say Dark Ages Vampire, we have most of the canon material in it. Something like Changeling the Dreaming, we're probably at 1/8, but it's the top most visible 1/8, right? It's the core mechanics, the core monster types, the overall political structure, and it's filling in the other stuff that will happen over time. And as we fill that in, it might not even be so noticeable that we fill it in. One thing we did early on in Princess of Darkness, even back in CK2 days, is that we have scripts that generate random characters that look like they are as fleshed out as a canon character. Right? Like they have similar traits, like, you expect Shemitzi to be in Eastern Europe around Romania. You expect Eshu of the Changelings to be in Africa. Like we wrote routines to both create those characters and also to dynamically generate coats of arms based on their faith and background and their regional setting. So sometimes you can't tell the difference between a canon character that doesn't have a lore button and a randomly generated character that is completely created by the machine based on our rule set. So that's one of the ways we've also been able to fill up the world so quickly. But like I said, in Europe, it's almost all canon characters for every county now, and even some of the non-canon characters are canon. So it happens over time. Character creation is actually one of the easiest tasks to do in Crusader Kings 3. It's very easy to learn how to make a character and write it out. It's a little more difficult to put one out with a lore background because it's actually pretty difficult sometimes to have writers. One thing we could probably use on Princess of Darkness is more guaranteed writers. I do a bit of the writing. The lion's share of our writing has come from my co-lead developer, Card, and English isn't even his first language. So he's been a real champ with the sheer volume that he has produced there. We do need more writers, and hopefully some people can step up to help with that. It's been one of the things that I've been thinking that actually maybe make a formal recruitment from, and that's something we could recruit from the greater TTRPG space. Like, hey, you're a writer, you want to work on a video game? Come join us. Yeah. And the other one would probably be like, some help on 3D modeling, particularly as we want to increase our amount of models to hit a modern setting.
So I guess just because I'm looking at my time, don't want to wrap it up because I'm really curious, but unfortunately I'm limited on time here. But so for the future of the mod, looking ahead, it's been 10 years. It's come a long way, even just in this Crusader Kings 3 iteration. What do you envision is what would you say is a end state for you? Like for you, I doubt you're ever going to leave it, but if you were to say, I'm ready to leave this mod, maybe for somebody who's making a mod and they're like, when do I know if it's quote done? What would that look like for you?
2 conditions.
Okay.
One condition is we would want to see completion of the Mage of the Ascension splat with an in-game crisis and probably the Final Night's bookmark. That would probably wrap it all up in terms of what we thought would be, a feature complete version of the mod. That we obviously can expand on it from there.
Mm-hmm.
There was even a Cyberpunk 2077 Vampire the Masquerade supplement at one point.
Oh my god! I mean, that sounds pretty awesome, though. To be honest, I would definitely be interested.
It has its charm, but that's even like more work. The other thing that would cause us to say we're done here would be if Paradox decided to release a World of Darkness grand strategy game, a grand strategy RPG.
Right.
And they were going to put real money into making such a property. Then, you know, I don't think it would come down to them, you know, giving us a cease or desist order. I think we would have a conversation and see what we could contribute to such a project and go with it from there. I kind of feel that, honestly, though, Princes of Darkness is occupying that space.
No, absolutely.
That Paradox would have to do. For instance, you know, in the Stellaris community, you've got Star Trek New Horizons mod, and that occupies the space that a standalone Paradox Grand Strategy Star Trek video game would occupy. And there was, you know, that Star Trek Grand Strategy video game. Well, it's shut down production now, and Star Trek mods for Stellaris keep on going, and I imagine would also happen if there's ever a Stellaris 2. So at the same time, you know, having worked inside of Paradox, there's just a lot of resources that Paradox brings to the table when making a game that we can't develop as a small modding team, whether it's, you know, 3D art assets, whether it's hiring lots of 2D artists to do things, whether it's having translation in all the languages that Crusader Kings is available in. And then also the big thing that Paradox brings to the table is promotion, you know. Game promotion makes a difference between whether you're a mod with like 100,000 subscribers or whether you sell 1 million copies, right? Like it's a bigger difference. And also like robust quality assurance. Very important thing to have. We do get bug reports, but we're only a small team to solve them. And so maybe some bugs linger on for a much longer time than they would if it was like a professional enterprise. So that would be, I think, the two things that would either cause us to stop. I'll suppose also at one point, Crusader Kings 4, I guess.
Right.
Crusader Kings 4.
I guess that would make sense. I couldn't even imagine. It seems like it would be too soon for Crusader Kings 4 to have.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think
too soon for Crusader Kings 4.
I think CK3's got some life.
Yeah, it has some life. You know, we've seen the floor plan that's laid out. You know, Alexander Altner has said he wants to expand to all of the old world, right? We're interpreting that as including China. And there's a huge Kindred of the East component.
Of course.
For World of Darkness that we could expand on. And we occasionally get asked, like, why don't you adapt Princes of Darkness to use the Asia expanded mod? We're like, well, because if what we understand, Altner is suggesting that they will eventually unleash China now that they have imperial mechanics, etc., we would be redoing our work. So we'll let Paradox change the map, and then we will adapt to that, because it won't just be a map change. There'll be, you know, 3D assets and, you know, imperial mechanics and et cetera, and we'll adapt to that to where they're going. And so that would be the other thing we can likely see in Prince of Darkness future. Where Paradox goes with the Crusader Kings 3, we will also go. So if they go to China, if they go to Japan, we will as well.
And I think that that's sort of what a consensus I've heard from a lot of mod teams is that they're sort of just waiting now, because it feels like we're at a point in Crusader Kings 3's development that every chapter is going to have at least one massive addition. I mean, that's what they promised anyway. But, you know, it feels like we're going to get, like, you know, Nomads or China or, you know, what have you. Republics I would very much like to see make a return, and very likely will, which I don't think would be a major expansion. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I think a lot of mod teams are working with what they have so far, and, you know, just sort of trying to wait it out. But I don't think the wait's going to be that long. I think Crusader Kings 3 is in a good spot. I think we all maybe were a little nervous earlier in the year, but it's come a long way. I'm definitely excited. And I also really want to thank you for this conversation. I hate cutting it short. I really don't want to because you seem to have such a wealth of knowledge. And so I want to ask before I let you go, is there any advice you have to anybody out there who wants to maybe start their own mod, to anybody who's maybe on a mod team? You have years of experience doing this, so I feel like it would be a good insight.
Right. My advice is start small. Start with modest expectations of what you want to do. And before you actually really get into it, when the first thing you release on Steam should be playable, not just like a resource kit, but like something playable that people can get into. And that a total conversion mod has to be a team effort. And that if you put some organization into building your team, like you're going to use a GitHub repository, like you're going to have a wiki, like you're going to track your work with some work tracking tools, you'll be better off in the long run. Very early on in Prince of Darkness, it was actually just my mad scheme plan, me working all alone in isolation for years. Not the best way to approach it. Put effort in to coming up with a way to organize the work at the beginning. If you're doing something like a total conversion, if you're doing something like Elf Destiny, you're just adding one thing, but then you're iterative. Start small, build your way up, build up your skills. Join the mod co-op, read the modding wikis, follow some of the mod instructional videos, pull down my PDXCon workshop mod, look inside the code and see how it works. But start modest, and it is not a sprint. It is a marathon. It could be a multi-year project. We're going on 10 years now with Princes of Darkness, and I think if I get hit by a bus tomorrow and Crusader Kings 4 comes out 5 years from now, someone will pick up this mantle and probably bring that vision to the next grand strategy game.
I would certainly hope so. I think that Princes of Darkness is here to stay. I definitely agreed with your position that it occupies the space that a World of Darkness grand strategy game would. I am fully of the opinion that it is a wonderful spiritual successor to any other Vampire the Masquerade game that could have come out. I actually have a video coming out about that in the near future, but I'm not going to show myself too much. I want to thank you for your time, Flint, and I will let you go.
I look forward to your next Vampire video.
Oh, of course.